Hello friends, in today's session we are going to talk about poverty. The topic poverty is there in General Studies paper 1 as well as General Studies paper 2. But you should be mindful that in General Studies paper 3, there are some topics which are also linked with poverty. For example, in economics, there will be topics related to inclusive development. So in General Studies paper 3 as well, you can get questions related to poverty. Also, in General Studies paper 4, you might have questions which have some form of reference to poverty. Passive mention of poverty can be there. Apart from this, when it comes to essay, time and again, we have seen questions related to poverty. So that makes this topic very, very important for your examination preparation. So let's get started with the topic. But before we deep dive, I want to make sure, or I want to highlight what are the learning outcomes, or what should be the learning outcomes from the discussion that we're going to have. Now, the first thing is, we need to have a good understanding of what poverty implies. Usually, we think that poverty means someone is not having enough resources, right? When someone is not having enough money. This is true. Poverty implies that people are not having enough money. If someone is poor, that person doesn't have enough money. But there are much more dimensions to this. For example, if someone is poor, most likely that person is also not having enough power. That person is not having good social connections, maybe. That person is marginalized. So what we will do is, we will try to understand all these different dimensions of poverty. Next thing that we will try to focus on, or at least next major learning outcome that I want to focus on is, how do you measure the extent of poverty, right? So countries world over, they all try to reduce the extent of poverty. Let's focus on that. But if you have to eliminate something, if you want to address something, the first thing that you have to do is find the extent of that. Right? If you say that this is a problem, then you have to understand the intensity of the problem. You have to find out the magnitude of the problem. But how do you do that? Same thing applies for poverty. How do you measure the extent of poverty? So we will be focusing on that as well. What are the different ways by which India has tried to estimate the extent of poverty? And not just India, there have been some international organizations, there are some international estimates. What are the methodology they have used to find out the extent of poverty? Another major learning outcome that I would consider is understand what causes poverty, what are some of the factors leading to poverty, and eventually what are some of the ways by which we can address poverty, maybe you can reduce poverty, maybe. So these are 3-4 major learning outcomes that I want you to take away with this particular discussion. After this discussion, you should be well versed with these things. Now, what is going to be the roadmap? How is the session structured? The first thing that we are going to do is, we will be focusing on the definition of poverty. We will look at some definition of poverty and what is the meaning of that definition. Then we will look at some facts and figures, some numbers. See, whenever you have some numbers, right, some quantities, it helps you understand the context. So that is what we are going to do. The next thing that we are going to do is, we will understand the different dimensions of poverty. We will deep dive now. What does poverty imply? Also, we will look at some larger questions, right? For example, should we be addressing poverty? What are some of the arguments given whether poverty should be tackled or not? So this is something that we're going to do. After that, we will try to find out, or we will try to analyze what have been some of the ways by which poverty has been measured in the Indian context, right? We look at some of these methods historically used to arrive at poverty estimates in India. Then we will have a small discussion on what causes poverty. We'll have a small discussion on what could have been done or what has not been done as a result of which poverty is prevalent in the Indian context, and some of these things are equally applicable world over. In recent times, we have seen some exogenous shocks, right? For a long time now, states world over have taken up different initiatives to reduce poverty. In case of India also, there have been different measures to address poverty. But 2019 and onwards, 2020, 2019 and 2020, in the initial few months, we saw different countries getting impacted by the COVID-19 virus. And as this virus spread from one place to another, there was massive implications on the economy. All these things led to a situation where the government expenditures increased and the government revenues went down. It's not just the government is getting impacted, private players are also getting impacted, businesses are getting impacted, economic activities are getting impacted. All these things are having massive implications on the governmental efforts that have been going on for reducing poverty. And all these things also had impact on unemployment, it had impact on multiple other things, as a result of which the poverty rates might have changed. So we will try to look at this dimension. And then another topic that I wanted to include here, this is something which is relevant from social issues as well as social justice perspective, poverty and its relation with women. Right? So there are some other topics in our syllabus which talks about women. So from those angles also you can look at it, as well as you can consider it as an independent topic. Right? So how poverty and women are linked with one another, or how women are poorer as compared to their male counterparts. And then we will look at some of the measures taken by the government to address poverty. So here we will have a broader discussion about what should be the role of government, and we will look at some schemes, policies which are right now in place. Some of the policies have been there for a long time now, some of the recent policies. We will broadly discuss some of these policies which have some role to play in eradication of poverty. So this is how the session looks like, and at the end we will look at some of the questions that have been asked in previous years, previously in the examination. So this is the rough structure and this is how the roadmap looks like. So let's get started with the definition of poverty. Now what we will do is, we will look at one of the definitions that has been given by the World Bank. The World Bank defines poverty as pronounced deprivation in well-being, and it comprises many dimensions. It includes low incomes, the inability to acquire basic goods and services necessary for survival with dignity. Right? So there are multiple components in this definition. Let's try to understand each of these components one by one, and then we will put it together. So first word, which is something that I've highlighted, which is significant here, is pronounced. What do you mean by pronounced? Pronounced implies marked or noticeable. Second word is deprivation. What is the meaning of deprivation? Deprivation implies denial of something which is usually considered to be a necessity. Right? So things which are necessary for human survival, things which are essential for human survival, if that is denied, it implies deprivation. So poverty is a marked deprivation, marked denial of something which is essential, which is necessary. So poverty is pronounced deprivation in well-being. Now what is the meaning of well-being? Now well-being can be thought of in different ways. One way to think of well-being, you can think of it in a narrow manner. So well-being might imply that you have access to different kinds of resources which are required for your survival. For example, access to food, access to shelter, clothing. These are all material resources, and these are all very important for one's survival. So the narrow definition of well-being will imply you have access to all these different kinds of resources, right? Resources like food, shelter, clothing, etc. But well-being can also be defined in a slightly broader manner. So well-being might imply that you have access to the right kind of physical health, you have access to the right kind of mental health, which again means you are free from different kinds of diseases. You are able to perform different kinds of activities. You are physically fit. You are mentally also fit. It might also imply that you have agency. You can bring about certain kinds of changes. You can take different kinds of decisions on your own. It also implies you have different kinds of social connections. You have power. So the broader definition of well-being will include access to all these things: physical, mental health, different kinds of connections in society, having some amount of power, having agency. All these things ensure your well-being. So if someone is deprived along these lines, if someone is not having access to all these different kinds of basic resources, food, shelter, clothing, etc. If someone is not able to access the right kind of physical health, if someone is deprived of physical health, if someone is deprived of mental health, is not having social connections, is completely marginalized, does not have any say. So all these people will be considered to be poor. Right? So poverty refers to the situation that these people face. So these are the different dimensions of poverty. Right? So the second part that you see, poverty includes low incomes, inability to acquire basic goods and services which are necessary for survival dignity. So yes, poverty implies low incomes. People don't have enough money. The regular inflow of income is limited. But at the same time, this income is so low that all the basic necessities, right, basic goods and services that you require for your survival, you are not able to access that. So this is how World Bank defines poverty, and it again tries to include the different dimensions here. Let's look at some of these dimensions. It implies low level of health and education. Usually people who are poor, their health conditions might not be good, and they might find it very difficult to access different health facilities. Right? They might not have enough money at their disposal to acquire different health facilities, acquire different kinds of health services when needed. They might also have low levels of education. Right? They might be illiterate, or they might have studied, but they would not have high levels of education. Maybe with some standards they would have studied, but they might not have graduate education or postgraduate education. It also implies poor access to clean water. It also implies poor access to different kinds of hygiene and sanitation facilities. In the case of India, just look at the poor people. Right? They will not have access to clean drinking water facilities. They will not have access to toilet facilities. It also implies inadequate physical security. Right? So they might not be having the right kind of shelter facilities. Right? So they might be staying outside. They might be sleeping on the roads, on the streets, under the flyover. All these spaces are not physically secure, and again, there are different kinds of threats to their life. They might lack voice, right? They're marginalized. So as a result of which, they might not have enough voice in the different kinds of political institutions, in the different kinds of social institutions, right? So if they're suffering, whatever they want to express, they're not able to express because there's no one who is willing to take up their voice, no one is willing to listen to their voice, and they do not have enough capacity and opportunity to improve their own life, right? So they might not have access to the right kind of jobs, they might not have access to different kinds of other economic opportunities. As a result of which, the chances of them improving their lives gets restricted. So there is minimal amount of social mobility opportunities for them. So this is how the World Bank defines poverty. Now, at this point, don't worry if you have not understood some of these dimensions. We will again look at poverty in details. Right? When we look at the multiple dimensions of poverty, we will look at different details. And also we will see how people are deprived along multiple lines. Right? So in case some of these points are still not clear, we have some rounds to cover and we will have some discussions around each of these things. So yeah, just be patient for, you can just be patient for a few minutes. Now what we will do is, we will look at some facts and figures related to poverty. It will give you a context. Where does India stand in terms of poverty alleviation? And again, world over, what are the numbers related to poverty? So let's look at some data points. So if you look at World Bank data, right? So World Bank has come up with one definition of extreme poverty. According to it, if someone is living on less than $1.9 per day, that person is considered to be extremely poor. So basically, they are able to spend just $1.9 or less per day. So these people are considered to be extremely poor. So this is how World Bank defines poverty. In India, again, we have different other estimates, and at international level also there are different other estimates. So this and this is one of the anchor points, right? There can be other ways of estimating poverty. So according to this particular definition of poverty, some 9.2% of the world population are extremely poor. Right? So basically, 9.2% of the world population is living on less than $1.9 per day. And again, this whatever definition they have come up with, right? They have taken into consideration purchasing power parity, they have taken into consideration inflation across countries. On the screen, you can see a graph which basically shows different countries, and these countries are arranged as per their incomes. And for each type of countries, you can see what is the proportion of people in this country who are living on less than $1.9 per day. Right? So on the y-axis, you have countries arranged in terms of their income. Right? So these are countries. The first one is countries who have low income. Then you have countries which are having slightly higher income than low income countries, but again, it's not quite high. So these are the lower middle income countries. Then you have the upper middle income countries. Then you have the high income countries. Now, one thing you will observe: the x-axis basically tells you what is the proportion of people who are living below less than $1.9 per day or below certain thresholds. Right? There are different kinds of thresholds here. So in the low income countries, 45.8% of the population lives below $1.9. Right? So almost half of the population in the low income countries, they are living on $1.9 per day or less than that. Now in the low middle income countries, around 15.5% of the population, they are living on $1.9 a day or less than $1.9 a day. In upper middle income countries, around 2.3% of the population lives on or below $1.9 per day. And in the high income countries, like US and other countries, just 0.6% of the population lives on an income or lives below $1.9 per day. Right? So what you can observe here is, as the incomes of country, per capita GDP of the countries changes, you will find lesser number of people who are in extreme poverty. Right? So rich countries, high income countries, countries which have high GDP per capita, countries which have high national incomes. In these countries, you will have less prevalence of extreme poverty. Those who are the low income countries, those who are the poorer countries, they will have large section of population who are extremely poor. Apart from this $1.9 per day threshold, you can also see they have the World Bank. This is basically a illustration by the World Bank based on 2017 data. So you can find out they have also pointed towards different thresholds. For example, in high income countries, around 21.4% of the population they live on $21.7 per day or less than $21.7 per day. Right? This is the amount of money that they able to spend. Right? So it basically points out that in high income countries, you will have more affluent people and you will have less prevalence of extreme poverty. Now, this is something for 2017. Now, the question is, and this basically paints a very grim picture, right? So many people, especially in the low income countries, are living in extreme poverty, right? So they might not be able to afford some of the basic necessities of life. So this is something which is sad kind of thing. But is everything grim? Is everything sad? Now I want to highlight the changes that happened over a period of time. Right? So how have different countries fared over a period of time when it comes to dealing with poverty? Right? So different countries, they have put efforts in reducing poverty, and now also they continue to do so. So over a period of time, how have things changed? So on the x-axis, you have the time, right, different years, right, from 1980 onwards to 2015. On the y-axis, you have population, and the different colors that you see, it basically denotes, right, what is that threshold, right, that people are living on. For example, this light pink kind of thing that you see, this basically denotes what number of people at any point of time are living below $1.9 a day. This slightly dark pink that you see, it shows what number of people are living on $1.9 to $3.2 per day. The dark red or the maroon kind of thing, it denotes what is the number of people who are living above $10 a day, right? So this color coding helps you understand that. Now let's look at 1981, right? So this particular year. In 1981, you can observe that large chunk is light pink, and again, the other colors that are there, right, they are also comparatively small. So it basically denotes that a large chunk of population at that point of time was under extreme poverty. But over a period of time, what has happened? This light pink area is gradually decreasing in its size. So if you look at 2015, so this light pink is way less than what it was in 1981. And just look at this light pink as compared to the entire population. So the proportion of people living under extreme poverty has also gone down drastically. The proportion of people in this dark maroon or these other shades have also increased drastically. So what it implies is, as compared to 1981, in 2015, lesser number of people, lesser proportion of people are under extreme poverty over a period of time. Different states, whatever policies they have come up with, different intergovernmental efforts that have been there, right? There are different intergovernmental efforts as well, different countries help each other in addressing poverty. So whatever efforts have been there, it has led to a reduction in extreme poverty. Right? So there's something which tries to tell you that things are not all bad. Right? Efforts are on, and we have been able to deal with poverty. Again, what is that acceptable level of poverty? That's different. Right? We might not have been able to achieve acceptable level of poverty. We might not have been able to completely eliminate poverty. But the point is, we have been able to reduce poverty. And we here, first of all, again, efforts made by countries worldwide. So this is how things look like. Why I'm highlighting this particular image is usually there is always a pessimistic picture that people are becoming poorer over a period of time. That might not be true. If the data suggests otherwise, right? Just look at the proportion of this light being thing as compared to the entire scenario, and look at the proportion of the light being as compared to this entire thing, right? So over a period of time, things might have become better, not worse. So now let's look at some data from India. Right? This was all global data. Now in case of India, how things stand as of now. See, when it comes to official estimates of poverty, in India we haven't had some official estimates for a long time now. So the last official estimate that we had was Rangarajan Committee's estimate, and this report came out in 2014, and the committee was set up in 2011, and the data was based on 2011. So according to the Rangarajan Committee, the poverty rate in India is 29.5%. So all India poverty rate is 29.5%. So if we have 100 people in India, 29.5 of them are poor. So this is as per Rangarajan Committee's report based on 2011 data, and it was published in 2014. After that, we haven't had any official estimate. But there have been some other ways by which poverty has been calculated. There has been attempts made by different international organizations. And recently what happened was NITI Aayog and some other international institutions, right? United Nations Development Program and Oxford Poverty and Development Initiative, they collaborated together and they came up with what is called as the National Multidimensional Poverty Index. So, and they published their findings in 2021. And according to their findings, in case of India, we have 25.01% people who are multidimensionally poor. But keep in mind that this is also based on 2015-16 data, which was published by National Family Health Survey, fourth round of National Family Health Survey. So this is the National Multidimensional Poverty Index, and according to that, 25.01% of India's population is multidimensionally poor. Now, another report which also talks about multidimensional poverty is the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index. Now, this index is prepared by Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative and United Nations Development Program. They peg India's poverty rate to be around 27.9%, and their finding is also based on the findings of the fourth National Family Health Survey data. Right? So there is something interesting here. The National Multidimensional Poverty Index is saying that poverty rate is around 25.01%. The Global Multidimensional Poverty Index is saying that the poverty rate in India is somewhere around 27.9%. And Rangarajan Committee's finding was, in case of India, we have poverty rate of around 29.5%. So you can observe one thing, that poverty rates are, the poverty rates are varying. One reason it could vary is, again, the Rangarajan Committee's estimate was made before, it's based on 2011-2020 data, it was made before as compared to these multidimensional poverty index. But the two multidimensional poverty index that I'm talking about, they are based on similar data. Still, there is a difference in the poverty rates. Now, why this is happening, what could be the reason behind this? So we are going to take it up in a while. But keep in mind, whenever we are estimating something like this, whenever we try to measure something like this, the way you measure these things, the data set that you're considering, the methodology that you're using, the parameters that you're taking into consideration, all these things, if they're varying, it will lead to different results. And possibly that is what is happening here. So I just want to highlight one thing. Whenever any counting takes place, what is measurement counting, right? Whenever you have any form of counting, you will come across different estimates based on the methodology that you have, based on the data set that you're using, based on the parameters that you're considering. So counting is inevitably qualitative. But does that mean you should not count? Does that mean you should not measure things? No, you should. Because if you don't measure things, you will not know what is the reality, what is the objective situation. So you should measure things, but again, how you are measuring things, what factors you are taking into consideration, what are the assumptions, what are the proxies, all these things should always be upfront. There should be debate discussions around this, there should be communication around this, right? So, and usually, right, over a period of time, what generally happens is your methodology also becomes better, right? So counting is qualitative, but that doesn't mean you should not be counting. You should be counting things, and then only you will get the right picture. So these are how the numbers look like. And again, this is one illustration. Again, has been taken from World Bank based on 2011 census. This basically gives you an idea what is the extent of poverty. And again, here also you'll find that the numbers might be slightly different from Rangarajan Committee's estimate. It might be slightly different from the other estimates that we saw just now. So this is about the facts and figures. Now what we will do is we will discuss the meaning of poverty in slightly more detailed manner. So what does poverty imply? Usually, the commonsensical notion here is people do not have enough incomes, right? People don't have enough earnings, and those people who do not have enough earnings, those people who do not have enough incomes, they are poor. This understanding is true. This is, but I would say this is partially true, not completely true. So what is the meaning of poverty? See, we need to look at the different dimensions of poverty to get a better picture of poverty. So what are the different dimensions of poverty? Poverty implies fewer assets. People who are poor, they don't own enough assets. Right? For example, people who are poor might not have different electrical appliances. They might not have different electronic items. They might not own a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler. These are all assets. So being poor implies you don't own these assets. You do not have access to these assets. Poverty also implies landlessness. People who are poor, they don't own land. They don't have access to land. In some cases, they might have land, but the quality of land might be inferior, which might not be of much use. The value of this land will be less. Poverty also implies low income, which is something that I already talked about. They don't have any income. They have low income, or the income source that they have, it is kind of unstable, right? Maybe this month they have some income. Tomorrow they might not have enough income. It also implies low consumption. So if your incomes are low, if you do not have enough money, how will you be spending? Right? You can't spend money. And if you're not spending money, how will you consume different kinds of things? You might not consume enough food because you don't have income. You don't have money. How will you spend on carbohydrates, on proteins, other things? You can't purchase vegetables and cereals and fruits. So it also implies low consumption. And low consumption is not necessarily low consumption of food. It can also imply low consumption of other things as well. Right? Maybe you can't pay for your medical bills. So as a result of which you will not be able to access different healthcare facilities. You are not able to consume education because education also needs some form of payment. There's fees involved. So poverty also implies low consumption. It implies no savings. You don't have income. How will you save? Right? Only when you have income, enough income, so that your basic requirements are met. After that, only you can save. But if you're not even earning enough so that you can purchase your basic requirements, then how will you save? It also implies high indebtedness. Poor people, they are not having enough resources with them. Their requirements are not being met. So what they will do? They will try to access resources from others. They will possibly try to take loans from others. As a result of which, they are perpetually in debt. If their incomes increase, in that case, they will be able to fulfill their requirements. Whatever loans they have taken, they will be able to repay those loans along with the interest. But if their incomes are more or less kind of going down, or they are stable, it is very low, in that case, they will remain in perpetual state of indebtedness. Poverty also implies joblessness, employment insecurity, food insecurity. Poor people, they might not have job. They might not have employment security. Today they are working, tomorrow they might be just thrown out. Many of these poor people, they are not having a long-term, they're not working on long-term contracts, right? They're all working as maybe casual employees. They're just contractual employees, short-term contracts. So today they're working, tomorrow they can be thrown out. So there's high level of employment insecurity. And whenever anything happens to the economy, right, they are the first ones to get impacted, right? Just think of the pandemic, right? Look at the scenario, what happened during the pandemic. So during the pandemic, again, economic activity got impacted. So those who are from the middle classes, those who are from the affluent sections, right? So they could still go on with their jobs. But those who are at the bottom, they lost their jobs, right? The migrant crisis that you saw during the first wave of the pandemic is a reflection of that. So their jobs are extremely insecure. And then there's high level of food insecurity. Today they are having food, tomorrow they might not have food. Also, what kind of food that they're consuming? Maybe it's not balanced. Maybe some kind of nutrients they're not consuming, some kind of nutrients they're over-consuming. So there's food insecurity as well. Poverty also implies illiteracy. It implies lack of formal education and training. Right? So you don't have access to education facilities. You're not having access to formal skill development mechanisms. Right? You're lacking training. It also implies poor health, housing, ill health, poor sanitation. People who are poor, they don't have access to housing facilities. They don't have access to sanitation facilities. They don't have access to good drinking water facilities. They find it difficult to access healthcare facilities. Poverty also implies marginalization and high dependency. Now, what is the meaning of this? Marginalization. Marginalization means you are at the margins. If you look at the society, there are some people who are at middle of society, so to say. Like they are the ones who have access to different kinds of resources. They are the ones who are powerful. They have a voice. But poor people are at the margins. They are at the borders. Whatever they are saying, no one is listening to them. Right? They don't have a voice. Right? So they don't have access to different kinds of channels. So whatever are their concerns, whatever are their issues, no one is taking it up. So poverty also leads to marginalization. It causes voicelessness. And poor people are extremely dependent. Now, what is the meaning of this? Poor people, they don't have access to resources, but they will have different kinds of needs, right, for basic survival. Now, what happens in such a scenario? In this scenario, they will be again dependent on different kinds of government schemes, policies. So the state here refers to the state of India, it refers to the state of India, as well as again different kinds of government institutions that are there in the state of India. So state governments will have different policies, institutions. The union government will have different kinds of policy institutions. So there are different kinds of policies for the poor. So the poor people are completely dependent on these kinds of schemes and policies for their survival. Example, previous, right, fair price shops that you see. So poor people, since they don't have enough opportunities, they will be dependent on the food that they're getting from these ration shops. So there is high level of dependency. If the government is not providing them these resources, again, you don't know what will happen to them. Also, there's something that you saw during the first lockdown during the pandemic. At that point of time, the government was also overburdened with so many responsibilities. And in many cases, the government was not able to fulfill some of these responsibilities. So they found it difficult. All of a sudden, they have to provide for different kinds of things. And again, the frontline workers, they were trying to deal with the pandemic. So those people who are poor, those who are dependent on the government schemes, policies, etc., they could not get the services because the state was not able to provide services in the initial few days. And you saw what was the outcome. There were long queues everywhere. People were migrating from urban areas to rural areas. In the hope that maybe there will be some support in the rural areas back home. So there is high level of dependency. And when there is high level of dependency, what happens? If there is some form of exogenous shock, if circumstances change, they are the ones who are impacted more. Right? And this is what happened during the time of the pandemic. They're heavily dependent on state, they're heavily dependent on the government schemes, policies, etc. And if the government is not able to fulfill some of these requirements, they are extremely vulnerable. Right? So they face the brunt of it. Apart from that, poverty also implies few contacts with key persons and institutions. They're not in friendship. They don't know people who are in friendship. Right? They're not the elite. Rather, they are opposite fighting. They're at the bottom. People who are rich, people who have enough resources, they know people, they have contacts. Right? They can in fact influence policies. But poor people at the bottom, they don't have enough contacts to influence policies. They are not having enough involvement in different kinds of influential form. Always there is competition among the poor for basic resources. Just look at things around you. Right? If you are passing by a slum, you will observe that there will be one hand pump and there will be a long queue to get water from the hand pump. So what is this long queue all about? There are so many people who are all competing with one another for getting water. There will be community washrooms, toilets, right? You will find long queue. What is happening here? People are basically competing with one another so that they can access something which is as basic as a toilet facility. So among poor, there is always be competition for resources. Outside factories, right, which hire maybe casual laborers, right, on a daily basis, right? They're not having long-term contracts. So you'll find long queue of laborers every morning. So let's say there are 100 laborers who are standing in that queue. Maybe at the end of the day, not end of the beginning of the day, the supervisor will come and he will shortlist 20 laborers out of that. So basically the remaining 80 are not taking any job for that day. So every day they're competing who will be the first one to be in that queue. So poor people are competing for scarce resources. And keep in mind, whenever you're always competing, the cognitive resources, the mental resources are also always occupied. They are economically vulnerable and they are subordinated. They're vulnerable. If something happens somewhere else, they're the first ones to be impacted. Be it a pandemic, be it some form of natural calamity, they are the first ones to be impacted. If something happens in the United States, let's say there's a recession in the United States, and since we are having an interconnected economy now, like globalized economy, something happens in the United States, they are sent to the sides, something all countries get impacted, and who are the most impacted? The poor. They are the first ones to be thrown out of job. When the economy contracts, right, the middle classes, the affluent classes, they still have some amount of protection, they have some safeguards. But the poor people don't have. They're extremely vulnerable. They have low self-esteem, they have low self-status and social status, and some of them resign to fate. Now, what is the meaning of this? Resign to fate. Poor people, they're always competing with one another for basic resources, and sometimes they realize that, or sometimes they feel that it's not worth it. Whatever amount of efforts that they're putting, they are not getting the results. They still continue to remain at the bottom of the social hierarchy. They are not able to move up the social hierarchy. There's not much social mobility happening. And in such a scenario, they will maybe just resign to fate. Let fate decide what will happen. I can't do much. I've done enough. Right? So this is what might happen. Like just resign to fate. Give up. Don't do much. Don't put efforts. Don't fight. And poor people, they focus on subsistence living. Every day is a challenge. Every day is a fight. Every day is a competition. Every day they are just fighting to ensure that their basic needs are being met. They have 2 square meals a day. So if they are just fighting for subsistence living, and in fact, that is also what they're not getting, it makes it difficult for them to plan for the future. It is easy to say that poor people are not thinking about the future. They should invest money and become rich over a period of time. But you should realize that they don't have even basic requirements met. Right? They don't know whether they will have a wholesome dinner tonight or not. They don't know whether their children will be able to have some food and they will not be sleeping in an empty stomach tonight. So their focus is on gathering that basic requirements, which basically consumes all their cognitive resources, which makes it difficult for them to have future plans. Right? So the focus is primarily on subsistence living, which again prevents them from, or which restricts their capacity to have future plans. So this is how poverty looks like. These are the different dimensions of poverty. So what I want you to understand, or what I want you to take home from this discussion is, poverty is not just about low income. It encompasses all these things. Poor people, why they can't have future plans, what makes it difficult for them to focus on long-term future plans, how there is competition among poor people for scarce resources, how it consumes a large part of their cognitive resources, how they do not have much influence, how they are not powerful, how they have no self-esteem, why do they resign to it. So these are the reasons, or this is how poverty looks like. Right? So whenever you think of poverty, don't restrict yourself to low incomes. Think about all these things. Now the question is, poverty looks like this. So should we be trying to address poverty? And we here refers to states, society. Should states refers to the political unit, right? The state of India or the state of US, the state of United Kingdom. So should they try to address poverty? What is the reason why poverty should be addressed? Now, I would want you to pause the video for let's say 30 seconds. I would want you to reflect. What is the reason why poverty needs to be addressed? Why poverty needs to be tackled? Take 30 seconds and reflect on it. Come to think of poverty. This is something which is preventing people from living a life of dignity. Right? People are not able to survive with dignity. Right? Their basic resources are not being met. So there has to be some ways by which they can lead a life of dignity. And this is where the states, the society should pitch in. What is state? State is nothing but people coming together and creating one political entity which can look at the welfare of people. Right? So one of the primary goal of any state is to ensure that people have basic dignity. People can live a life of basic dignity. People have basic resources at their disposal. So there is one moral ethical reason here. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and his family. And the state should fulfill this role. In fact, at international level also, there are different kinds of intergovernmental organizations. So they also try to focus on this. At international level also, there are organizations which champion human rights. And it is a right of an individual to have all these basic necessities in place. So we need to address poverty so that every individual is able to live a life of dignity. So this is one of the reasons why we need to address poverty, and states try to do that. Right? So different kinds of government schemes, policies that we have, they are based on this reason. But it's not the only reason why poverty needs to be addressed, or why poverty is addressed rather. There is something which is also slightly selfish in nature. States, people, organizations, intergovernmental organizations, countries, right? They try to address poverty for their own self-interest as well. Why is it so? See, poverty anywhere is a threat to prosperity everywhere. If there is poverty in some pockets, it might impact people who are prosperous and who are staying somewhere else. So people who are prosperous who are staying somewhere else, it is in their interest to address poverty. Now I can give you an example here. Let's say there is one pocket somewhere, some region somewhere, where people are poor. They are living in unhygienic conditions. They don't have access to the right kind of sanitation facilities. So they're living in such circumstances where emergence of new diseases is likely. And since we are seeing a globalized world, maybe one disease emerged here. And since the world is globalized, people are moving from one place to another, there is movement of goods, people. Chances are there that this disease will spread to other places. To places where people are prosperous. But there are also people who get impacted by this particular disease which has emerged somewhere else. So poverty in some place is leading to unhygienic conditions, lack of sanitary conditions, which is causing health issues in different parts of the world. This is one example. Another way to think of it, let's say there is poverty in some place, and as a result of which, let's say there is poverty, there is inequality, as a result of which maybe some people over there are now becoming extremist. Maybe. They are feeling deprived. They think that the states have been unfair to them. They're taking up arms maybe. They're taking up guns, they're taking up arms. They start different kinds of, they might instigate others as well. And as a result of which, you don't know, I mean, they can now use different other mediums, they can use religion, they can use other factors, and they can create different kinds of social conflicts. So those who are prosperous, they will also be impacted by this. So poverty somewhere can lead to social conflicts which can impact prosperity in the entire society. Another example I can give you. This is something which is across borders maybe. So let's say there's one country X, and let's say there's a neighboring country Y. In neighboring country Y, let's say there's poverty. And this poverty can impact country X as well. How? Maybe there is massive level of poverty in country Y. It can trigger migrants, or it can trigger a migrant crisis to country X. Maybe people from country Y who are reeling under high inflation, high poverty. They don't want to stay in country Y, they want to move to country X. They find out ways to move to this place. Maybe the borders are porous, or maybe you have some other ways by which you can move here. There are some certain border bodies so that people move to country X. So either country X has to invest heavily on border control, which is again running on the taxpayers' money for people in country X, or they have to again find out different ways by which they host people who have migrated from country Y, which is again going to be drain on the resources of taxpayers of country X. So it is in the best interest of X, which is an affluent country, that people in Y are also affluent, or Y country to do well. So if there is poverty somewhere, people who are prosperous can also get impacted by this. So that's the reason different kinds of philanthropic organizations, different kinds of intergovernmental organizations, rich people, they will also try to address poverty. So this is something selfish, but yeah, I mean, it works well for everyone. So poverty anywhere is a threat to prosperity everywhere. This statement has actually been asked in UPSC mains examination once. So they gave the statement and it was an exhibition. Right, so you have to explain why poverty anywhere is a threat to prosperity everywhere. So these are the reasons why there is a need to address poverty. Now let's move to the next bit, measurement of poverty. So how do we measure poverty? Now come to think of it, poverty is a kind of a qualitative thing, right? We already discussed what poverty implies. Poverty means assetlessness, landlessness, few contacts, you're being marginalized, heavy competition. Right? So all these things imply poverty. Poverty implies all these things. Now, this is an experience kind of thing, right? People who are poor, they feel all these things. But how do we measure this? Right? When I say that in case of India, as per this committee report, 20% of people are poor, or as per this committee report, 30% of people are poor. Just think of it. How would they have measured it? Would they have gone to people and asked them, are you assetless? Are you not having power? Are you always facing some form of competition, etc.? Or how would they have done it? So what we are trying to do is something which is kind of subjective. We are trying to quantify it. We're trying to make it more objective. Right? We are basically quantifying something which is qualitative in nature. So how is this done? And it's not that poverty is measured only in India. World over poverty is measured. How do countries world over try to measure poverty? So this is something that we are going to discuss for the next few minutes. But before finding out how poverty has been estimated in India, what we will do is we'll look at some concepts. And we will look at one of those ideal scenarios. Right? In case someone is asking you, how will you measure poverty? Right? What is the ideal scenario that you take? And if you are a policymaker, you cannot take ideal scenario because there will be so many constraints. Right? So how policymakers in India have measured poverty, we'll see after that. So first we'll look at some concepts. Then we will see how in an ideal scenario poverty should be estimated. Then we will see how poverty has been estimated in India over the years, over multiple decades. Then we will see some of the new ways by which poverty is being estimated nowadays. And we will also see some of the issues, challenges with different kinds of measurements. So for the next few minutes, this is how the discussion will look like. Now the first concept we need to keep in mind is the concept of absolute poverty and also the concept of relative poverty. What are these two terms? See, the concept of absolute poverty is usually used in developing countries or underdeveloped countries. The concept of relative poverty is usually used in the high income countries. Now what is the difference? What are the meaning of these terms? See, under absolute poverty, what you do is you first find out what are those things which are essential for the survival of an individual. And then you find out how much money will be required to have all these resources. Then you find out what percentage of population is able to afford this, what percentage of population is not able to afford this. So that percentage, those people who are not able to afford this basic basket of goods and services, they are called absolute poor. And this type of measurement is basically measuring absolute poverty. So this is one methodology, one way of estimating poverty. Relative poverty is slightly different. Here what you are doing is you are trying to estimate poverty in relation to the rich people of the country. Right? So what you are trying to do is you are finding out what let's say the median income of that country, right? And we are comparing, and we are basically finding out a percentage who are below the median percentage or some threshold they are finding, and who are below that threshold they are considered to be relatively poor. Right? So in relation to the rich of the country, where you stand, that decides relative poverty. So basically in these countries, what happens is certain percentage of economically bottom section is always considered poor. And these people might have all their basic necessities met. They might have all those resources. For example, they might have access to food, healthcare, shelter, etc., etc. But since they are poorer as compared to the rich section of the population, they are considered to be poor. So despite they having all these basic resources, they will be considered poor, and government can have different policy schemes, interventions for them as well. They can get support from the people, and they might have all their basic necessities met. So in rich countries, since people have most of their basic necessities fulfilled, so certain section of the population, certain bottom percentage of the population are always considered poor, despite all their needs being met, and the government might still provide some support. In underdeveloped economies, in developing economies, the way you measure poverty is typically different. You find out what are those things which is absolute, which are essential for survival of individuals, and those are able to afford that. They are not considered to be poor. Those are not able to afford that. They are considered to be absolutely poor. So these are two concepts you should keep in mind. And sometimes a term like subjective poverty also you might come across. Subjective poverty implies that as compared to some reference point, you have become poor. For example, if someone was a billionaire before, but now because of again maybe some poor investment decisions or something, that person is a millionaire. That person is also considered to be subjectively poor because the reference point is the time when that person was billionaire. So when you have this term subjective poor, it implies at some point of time they were wealthier and now they have become poorer. So your reference point is that point where you were more different. But again, only when you come across terms like this, you can think of these things. May not be relevant always. Now let's look at some definitions which you come across frequently. First is poverty line. Poverty line refers to a minimum expenditure or income that is required to purchase a basket of goods and services necessary to satisfy basic human needs. Right, just now I explained how you measure absolute poverty. Countries like India measure absolute poverty. So for that, what you do first identify what are those things which are essential for human survival, food, clothing, shelter, basic things. Then you try to find out what is going to be the cost to acquire all these things. Right. So that income, the income that you require to purchase these things, or the expenditure that you have to incur to purchase these things, that is referred to as the poverty line. So the minimum expenditure or income that is required to purchase this basket of goods and services which is essential for an individual survival, that is called poverty line. What is poverty line basket? It refers to the basket of goods and services which is essential for meeting the needs of an individual, which is essential for human survival. Now, what is poverty ratio, headcount ratio? The proportion of population below the poverty line, that is called the poverty ratio or the headcount ratio, which is again not difficult to understand. So these are few concepts you will come again and again. That's why I just wanted to point it. Now, how will you measure poverty? How will you create that poverty line basket? Let's assume that you are now tasked. You have been given a task by the Prime Minister's office maybe to estimate poverty in India. In such a scenario, what steps will you follow or how will you go ahead with estimating poverty? So first thing that you will do is you will try to find out the poverty line basket. Right? Then you will try to find out how many people have enough income or how many people are spending enough so that they can afford the poverty line basket. And this is something which is going to give you the headcount ratio or poverty ratio. But what steps will you follow to estimate that poverty line basket? This is something which is important. This is something which again can be subjective. So what we'll do is we'll try to look at some of the steps which are used to come up with this poverty line basket. So what will you do? Now, what I want you to do is maybe you can pause the video right now and you can take 60 seconds to analyze, to think, to reflect how you, who has been given this important task by the Prime Minister's office, right, how you are going to fulfill this task. Right? What are some of the steps that you're going to take up? Right? Go look at the screen. You try to do it on your own. So the first thing that you will try to do is find out what are those items which are essential for human survival. You'll put those items in that basket. You'll consider those items for the basket. Now these items can be, right, these items can be food, it can be clothing, it can be shelter, it can be education, and in fact you can also include things like entertainment, recreation. You are the one who has been given the authority by the Prime Minister's office right now. Right? So you can consider anything. You can also consider how much amount of money an individual has to spend in community from one place to another. People have to come to the workplace and back to the home. How much amount of money an individual has to spend on communication. People have to spend money on communication as well. So you can consider all these items. Right? In an ideal scenario, all these items should be considered. You can assume that all these things are basic necessities. In fact, you can also consider internet and other things, which again are very important in the present context. So it's up to you. In an ideal scenario, this has to be considered. But again, whether all these things are considered, that's a different thing. So first thing that you typically do is take or identify all these items which are essential for survival of a human being. Next thing is identify the weightage of each of these items. Keep in mind, all these items are not equally important. Something like food, something like health will be more important as compared to let's education. If you think that education is more important than health, just imagine a scenario where someone is unhealthy and going to school. That person will not sustain. That person will fall sick and eventually that person might even die. So some of these things are more important than others. There is no point in providing education if the person is not surviving. Right? So food, health might be given more weightage as compared to something like education or something like entertainment. You might not even consider entertainment. In some cases you might not. Sometimes it is said that if you have to create wholesome personality, right, you need entertainment. But when it is a matter of survival, at that point of time, maybe you can give less importance to something like education or recreation. So the point here is you have to again give weightage to each of these criteria. Not all will be equally important. The next thing is you have to quantify. All these items right now are qualitative. You just identify that okay, food is important, health is important, housing is important, fuel is important, communication is important. But how much of all these things is important? How much food do you need to take up every day in your life? What kind of food do you need to take? How much carbs you need? How much proteins you need? How much fat you need? On fuel, how much expenses you have to make? For purchasing this amount of food, how much money is required? Right? So somehow you have to come up with a quantity, a number. You have to come up with a magnitude. Right? So you have to quantify all these qualitative items. Right? Maybe you can think of it like this. How much amount of money is required to purchase these many grams of fat per day, these many grams of proteins per day, these many amount of carbohydrates per day? How much amount of money is required to purchase fuel? And again, you have to find out on an average how much amount of fuel is required by an individual. On an average, how much amount of proteins are required by an individual, how much amount of carbohydrates is required by an individual. You have to find out on an average how much amount of money one has to spend on education. So you have to come up with quantities. Or else if you just have these broader things, right, all these broader items, you can never measure. You need quantities to measure. So you have to quantify all these qualitative items. So once you have quantified, the next thing is you have to also take into consideration how the consumptions will vary. For some age groups, the consumption will be more. For some age groups, the consumption will be less. For one gender, the consumption might be different. For occupations, consumptions might vary. The consumptions might vary depending on the regions as well. I'll give you an example. Those people whose occupation involves activity which requires manual tasks, right? They heavy labor tasks, manual tasks. These people might require more energy. These people might require more carbohydrates. While those occupations which does not require a lot of manual labor, they might not need enough too much of carbohydrates. Right? So depending on age, depending on occupation, depending on culture, depending on gender, the requirements will be different. Right? So the quantity that you had taken right now, it was an average for everyone. And that will not be true for all different groups. So you have to take into consideration the variation in consumption. And the last part, the consumptions also change over a period of time. It's not that whatever you were consuming in 1970s, the same kind of consumption will be there in 1990s, the same kind of consumption will be there in 2010s. In 1960s, 70s, maybe people are consuming more cereals, rice, wheat, and other things. Over a period of time, people are consuming more vegetables, more fruits, more proteins. So your poverty line basket also needs to change. Maybe at that point of time, when you were taking food into consideration, maybe the focus was more on carbohydrates. Now your poverty line basket needs to be updated. It has to include fats, proteins, and other components. So with time also, you need to update the poverty line basket. So if I have to summarize, how do you create this poverty line basket? First is to identify items which has to go into the basket. Next is you have to give weightage. Not all items are equally important. Some items will be very insignificant. Some items will be of utmost importance. Then you have to give a number to each of these things. You have to assign magnitudes. You have to quantify some of these qualitative items. The next thing is you have to take into consideration the variation in consumptions. Right? Different regions will have different consumptions. Age groups will have different consumptions. Host of factors are there. And then the poverty line basket is not something that is uniform across time. Societies change, economies change, requirements change. So with time also we need to continuously update it. So once your poverty line basket is ready and you keep on updating it over time. Now you have the poverty line basket for a particular time period. Then what you will do? Then you will go to different households. You will carry out surveys. You will ask one of these two questions, right? Or you will try to find out one of the two things. One is you might go to a household and you will ask, you try to find out their incomes. If their income is above the poverty line that you have got from the poverty line basket, right? Let's say the poverty line basket or the amount of money that is required to purchase the poverty line basket is 50 rupees per person per day. Per person per day. Now, you can go to different households and you can try to find out the income data over there. If their income is more than, let's say, 50 rupees per person per day, then these people are not poor. But if their income is less than that, then they will qualify as poor. Another way to find out whether someone is below poverty line or above poverty line is going and doing a survey and asking them how much have they spent in the last few days and taking an average per day how much they're spending. If they're spending less than the poverty line, then they are considered below poverty line. If they're spending more than that, let's say they're spending 100 rupees per person per day, then they will be considered above poverty line. So these are two broader approaches by which you can find out the poverty ratios, the income ratios. Keep in mind, in case of India, we have a consumption-based poverty line and expenditure-based poverty line. Usually when surveys are carried out, right, whenever people who are carrying out the survey when they go to the households, they don't ask about the income data, rather they ask about the consumption data. They ask families in the last few days, like 30 days or 365 days or 7 days, right? They ask them how much amount of money you have spent on these kind of items. And from that, they will get an estimate how much amount of money this household is spending on these different items. And from that, they estimate whether this particular household is below poverty line or whether this household is above poverty line. Now, what is the reason why they are asking for expenditures, why they're asking for consumption, why they're not asking for income? So the reason being, in case of India, incomes fluctuate a lot. Large section of the population is engaged in agriculture. And in agriculture, you have again seasonal wages, right? Seasonal earnings. There will be certain seasons, certain durations where you will have good earnings, but then there will be some seasons where you will not, certain months where you will not have the right kind of income, you will have low incomes. So if you go and carry out a survey, if you ask them, let's say during the season where they are having good incomes, and if you ask them, so again, it will seem as if they're above the poverty line. But if you go to the same family, if you ask them about the incomes during the off-peak season, their earnings will be low. So you will not get the right kind of data. Why? If you ask them about their spending, it will be kind of smoother. Your consumptions will not change as fast. Incomes change, but more or less your consumption will be kind of smooth. It will not fluctuate as much, right? Because I mean, throughout the year, right, I'll be eating more or less similar kind of things. It's not that some months I'll eat more, some months I'll eat less. So consumption is usually smoother. As a result of which, we focus more on making these estimates based on expenditure, based on consumption. So this is how the poverty line basket is computed, and this is how you estimate what extent of the population is above poverty line, what extent of the population is below poverty line. So this is what I was talking about: income-based poverty line and consumption-based poverty line. In case of India, NSSO captures consumption expenditure, which is used to determine poverty line. And as I mentioned, there can be an alternative way where you ask, you try to find out the income of the population. But in case of India, since a lot of people have seasonal employment and the incomes are seasonal, the incomes are kind of irregular, and consumption patterns are more stable. We prefer the consumption-based poverty line. And also, if you're trying to measure incomes, it's very difficult to find out the exact income because a lot of people have side incomes. So this particular slide captures that. Now, what we will do is we will try to look at how at different points of time we have estimated poverty. We refers to the state of India. How India has estimated poverty. What are some of the official estimates of poverty? What have been the measures? Now, we will start from 1962 and we will move to 2011. Right? At different points of time, there have been different official estimates. I would want you to keep noticing how the way we are measuring poverty has gradually become better, or how it is becoming, how it is improving over a period of time. It is something that you should notice. Right? So let's get started. One of the initial estimates in post-independence India was made in 1962. At this point of time, the working group of Planning Commission was tasked with the work of estimating poverty in India. So what they did was they found out a national minimum consumption expenditure for a household of 5 members. So what they're saying is, if you are in an urban area or if you are in a rural area, right, they're finding out a threshold. If you are in an urban area, if you are spending more than 25 rupees per person per month, if you are able to spend 25 rupees per person per month, then you are above poverty line. If you are in rural area, if you are able to spend more than 20 rupees per person per month, then you are above poverty line. Right? So again, if you're not able to spend 20 rupees per person per month, you are poor. If you're not able to spend 25 rupees per person per month, then you are poor. So this particular threshold they're coming up with. So again, this is the poverty line they're coming up with. So now the question is, what all goods and services did they include in the poverty line basket? Right? At this point of time, did they include things like health, education, recreation, fuel, housing, all these expenses did they include? No, they did not include any of these things. So when I was talking about creating a poverty line basket, right, and you should include all these items I was mentioning, you can include all these items I was mentioning, I was talking about an ideal scenario. In reality, that might not be the case. And that is what is reflected here. In 1962, they're not including all these things. They are just including one thing: balanced diet. So at this point of time, the Indian Council of Medical Research came up with certain dietary norms. They're saying that your food should have this much amount of macronutrients, etc. All these things should be there in your diet. If all these things are there in your diet, then this diet is a balanced diet. So what they're doing is, this working group planning commission, they're trying to quantify how much amount of money will be required to purchase a balanced diet. And this much amount of money, that is not becoming the threshold, this is becoming the poverty line. So all the different factors that we were discussing at this point of time, just a few minutes back, they have not taken. Only food they have taken, nothing apart from this. Also, there might be another reason why they have not included things like health education. See, at this point of time, right, just after independence, the way the state was being created, the way the role of state was envisaged back then, it was assumed that the Indian state will be a socialist state, right? So things like health education will be provided by the government. There will not be much role of private players maybe. So individuals don't need to purchase health services, education services from outside. The government is providing for it. So if the government is providing for it, so there's no expense being incurred by the private citizens. That's what was the assumption. So anyway, it's free of cost. Why do you need to include it in the poverty line basket? Maybe they had these kind of assumptions. As a result of which they have not included these kind of formalities. So only food is included here. So and this is how the poverty lines look like. So this is what happened in 1962. Now after a few years, almost like 17, 18 years, another committee is tasked and they are coming up with their own recommendations. So in 1979, the Alag Task Force, they are now coming up with their own recommendations. What they're doing is they're saying that individuals require certain amount of calories in their diet. 2100 kilocalories, 2100 kilocalories. These two terms they came up with. I mean, this is something that you will come across in multiple opinion pieces, newspaper articles, etc. This actually traces back to the Alag Task Force. What they're saying is, in urban areas, people require 2100 kilocalories per day, and in rural areas, people require 2400 kilocalories per day. Right? People require energy to carry out their day-to-day life, day-to-day activities. So in rural areas, the calorie requirements are more as compared to the calorie requirements in urban areas. Now, why there's a difference here? So in rural areas, what kind of occupation people are engaged in? Most likely they're engaged in agricultural activities. Again, at that point of time, you did not have mechanization in agriculture. You might have some mechanization in agriculture, but it was not that rapid. Also in rural areas, you will not have the modern means of transport communication. You might have to walk longer distances, maybe you might have to carry out manual labor. But in urban areas, things might be different. Right? You have modern means of transport communication, there's mechanization, there's automation, and other things. Right? So need for manual labor is less, and the kind of occupation people are engaged in urban areas is slightly different. So you need lesser energy in urban areas. So this is the underlying assumption why you need less calories in urban areas as compared to rural areas. So what they're trying to do is they are saying that this much calories is required in urban areas, this much calories is required in rural areas, and they're trying to put a number to it. Right? How much amount of money is required to purchase 200 calories? How much amount of money is required to purchase 200 calories? Now this becomes the poverty line here. Right? So this is what other task forces do. So they are providing a monetary value, and according to them, 49.09 per capita per month is required to purchase 2400 kilocalories in rural areas. 56.64 per capita per month is required to purchase 2400 kilocalories in urban areas. And also they're adjusting for inflation. Right? With time, the value of money might change. The value of money usually in developing economies, the value of money usually decreases. So again, this number will change over a period of time. This 49.09 in rural areas can become 50, 60 later on. So they're also taking into consideration inflation. So this is how the other task force is trying to estimate poverty. And this is how the methodology looks like. Then almost 14 years from now, from 1979, you have another committee which is coming up with its report. This is the Lakdawala committee, 1993. Now, Lakdawala committee is retaining more or less whatever other committees suggested. Right? So retaining the mechanism. But what it is trying to do is it is now looking at the regional dimension of poverty. Right? So you have an all India estimate, but they also want to have state-specific poverty lines. So different states again will have different levels of poverty maybe. So state-specific poverty lines are now included here. Also, they are adjusting for inflation, and how they're adjusting for inflation, they're taking into consideration two different indexes. In urban areas, they're taking CPI industrial workers. In rural areas, they're using CPI agricultural laborers. Now, what are these two terms? And if you have already done your economics part, you might have some clarity on it. Or else in a nutshell, I can just explain. So over a period of time, the value of money can change. Right? So something which you can afford in 100 rupees maybe right now. In future, within 100 rupees, you cannot afford that, or you'll be able to purchase less of that. So this is the meaning of inflation. The value of money is changing. Now, how do you adjust for inflation? Right? When you're creating this poverty line basket, let's say you have created a basket which costs you 50 rupees. Right? So the different commodities you should have been able to purchase with 50 rupees over a period of time. The value of 50 rupees is now becoming less, and the goods here, whatever part of the basket, they have become more expensive. So with 50 rupees, with the help of 50 rupees, you cannot purchase these goods. So what you need to do is you have to update this. Right? Over a period of time, the cost of acquiring these goods, right, it should reflect the market prices. So all the goods that you had included, whatever changes in their price is happening, that should now reflect in the new poverty line. That's what we're trying to do. So what they're doing is in rural areas, right, you will again have a particular kind of poverty line basket. People in rural areas will have again, they will use different kinds of commodities. In urban areas, the commodities might be slightly different. So this index is linked with rural poverty line basket. This will basically reflect how prices of goods which are typically used by people in rural areas, how they have changed according to the poverty line basket is adjusted. The CPI industrial work, this index basically reflects how the prices of things which are typically used by people in urban areas has changed, and whatever is the change, let's say the price of all these goods have increased by 5%, the poverty line basket should also increase by some derivative of 5%. So this is what they are trying to do here. So poverty line basket is being updated. The rural basket is updated using CPI agricultural labor. The urban poverty line basket is updated using CPI industrial worker. So this is how Lakdawala, the committee, is now refining the poverty line estimates. Apart from that, they also came up with different state-specific poverty lines. They came up with poverty line for some 18 states. For some states, they did not have data. So in case there's a state for which they're not having enough data, what they're doing, they're trying to extrapolate. So there are, let's say, two states which are bordering one another, which have similar kind of economy, similar kind of demography. For one state, they have data. For another state, they don't have data. So they're extrapolating, right? So for the state for which they have data, they're extrapolating it. For the state which does not have data, so some estimations they have done, right? So rural, urban poverty rates, you are getting an idea, and state-specific poverty lines, you have with the help of the Lakdawala committee's recommendations. So till 1993, this is how the picture looks like. Now the next committee, which was given the task of estimating poverty, is the Suresh Tendulkar committee, and they are coming up with their estimates in 2005. What is the reason why they are given this particular task? See, till this point of time, you have the Alag committee estimates, you have the Lakdawala committee estimates. Now, the last committee, which did the estimates in 1993, right, it was again based on 1973-74 poverty line basket. Over a period of time, right, things would have changed. The way people are consuming different kinds of goods and services, it would have changed. Right, so that is something which has not been taken into consideration, how the consumption patterns would have evolved like, over the last 30 years. So the Tendulkar committee should evaluate or should estimate on the basis of the changes in consumption. Right, one example is maybe in 1970s people were consuming more of cereals, right, rice, wheat, other things. Now maybe people's consumption is different. So you have to take into consideration the recent poverty line baskets. Apart from that, till this point, right, focus was on calories, calorific consumption. Maybe you should start focusing on something else apart from calories. Right, other things are also important. Other kinds of nutrients are also important. Not just calories. You should look at food from the perspective of the nutrients as well. Also, till this point of time, we have not taken into consideration anything apart from calories like health, education, other things are not considered. So Tendulkar committee look at all these aspects, and they are now formulating their own methods to estimate poverty. So what are some of the changes now? First thing that they are doing is they are using what is called as mixed reference period instead of uniform reference period. In the past, what used to happen? Whenever NSSO, their surveyors used to go to households, they will ask individuals, that in the last 30 days, how much have you spent on certain commodities, right? So this is uniform reference period. So the reference period used to be 30 days. Now, the Tendulkar committee is suggesting that we need to have a mixed reference period. You should go and ask people in the last 30 days how much have you spent on certain commodities. But you should also have another reference period. You should ask people in the last 365 days how much have you spent on certain other kind of commodities. Which are those other commodities? Things like clothing, footwear, durable goods, education, medical expenses. See, these are expenses which you will not have every month, right? Maybe you spend some money on clothing in the month of October, and after that you are spending something on clothing in the month of April, maybe. So if you're going and carrying a survey in the month of March, you will not get any idea about clothing, how much that particular household has spent on clothing. So instead, have a larger reference period. So those kind of items, non-food items, clothing, footwear, durable goods, education, medical expenses, for them the reference period should be 365 days. So when you are going and asking households, right, how much they have spent on these items, they should be able to recall in the last 365 days how much they have spent on it. For other items, you can have a 30-day reference period. So in what you're trying to do here is you have now included more items, and you are ensuring that these items get covered during the service. The next thing that they're doing is they have included health and education. The previous estimates, they did not have health and education, right? It was assumed that maybe you'll have socialist government, the government will take care of all these things, the state will take care of all these things, but that's not the case, right? People have to pay for all these things. In fact, just look at the out-of-pocket expenditure people have on healthcare or medicines. You realize that large part of money, because whatever expenses people have is on healthcare, right? So health and education was included. Now, another suggestion that they had was you should have same poverty line basket for rural areas and urban areas. Right, which is again a departure from the past, because till this point of time you had different baskets, right? Rural areas will have a particular basket, urban areas used to have a particular basket. Now they're having a different basket, and the poverty line was in the form of rupees per capita per month. This is the format that they're using. So this is what was recommended by the Tendulkar committee. Now, just reflect on this. If you have the same data set, but you are using different methodology. Let's say you are using Tendulkar's methodology and you are using the Lakdawala methodology. And you are using the same data set. What will happen? What will be the number that you get? What is going to be that all India poverty number? What is going to be the rural poverty number? And the poverty number? I don't want the number as such, but what will be the trend that you notice? See, in Lakdawala committee, what happened? You used to have two different baskets. In the Tendulkar committee, the two baskets combined, you have just one basket. In Lakdawala committee, you are only taking into consideration calories. While in Tendulkar estimates, you are moving beyond calories. In Lakdawala committee, you are not including clothing, footwear, and other things, health, education. In Tendulkar committee, you are including all these things. So your poverty line basket will now change. Right? If the poverty line basket is changing, what will happen? The poverty line will also change. Most likely it's going to increase. And if the poverty line is increasing, what will happen? Whatever estimates that you have will change. So for the same year, the poverty line baskets for the two communities are different. The poverty lines for the two communities will be different. As a result of which, the number of poor people, the proportion of people who are poor will also be different. So on the screen, you can see this. Right? For the same year, if you look at Lakdawala committee's methodology and Tendulkar committee's methodology, the poverty ratios will be different. As per Lakdawala committee in 2004-2005, 27.5% of India was poor. As per Tendulkar committee's methodology in 2004-2005, 37.2% of India was poor. Now you have to think about it. You have to reflect on it. When government, let's say the government has actually commissioned a committee like the Tendulkar committee, and all of a sudden the committee now comes up with the data, and governments have to declare all these things, right? They say that the poverty rates have become 37.2%. Previously, whatever you're doing was on the basis of Lakdawala committee. At that point of time, the poverty numbers were less. And now the Tendulkar committee says 37.2% people are poor. So what will happen? There will be a massive hue and cry. Right? The media will start questioning that, okay, we have what is government doing? Under your government, the poverty ratio has gone up. The opposition will also start questioning things. Right? What have you been doing? You are reformed the government and the number of people who are poor has increased massively. But is the number of poor increasing massively? No. What has happened is the methodology has been changed. In fact, the newer methodology is including more dimensions. It is ensuring that more factors are taken into consideration. It is ensuring that different data points are also taken into consideration. The reference period has changed now. So keep in mind, all these exercises, the way you are estimating something, like this exercise, it can be political. Right? If there is a government which does not want to tell you the real picture, what they might do, they might not measure things, or what they might do is they will remove some of the parameters, maybe. Right? They will change the poverty line basket, maybe. They will include lesser parameters, maybe. And that what will happen? The poverty line numbers will, the poverty line will change, and the poverty ratio will also go down. So what is important is you should always look at the details, right? Just don't look at the numbers, 37.5 or 27.5. Look at what all goes behind these numbers, right? How these numbers have been arrived at. Right? So this is what will give you a better sense of the situation. Now, this was in 2004-2005. After that, again, some attempts were made to estimate poverty. And this is kind of the last official measurement of poverty. 2012, at this point of time, the Rajasthan committee was set up, and they came up with a report in 2014. Right? So what they are saying? So they're coming up with certain numbers. They're saying that these are the poverty lines, 972 rupees in rural areas, 1407 in urban areas. This is per capita monthly expenditure. Right? You don't need to remember these numbers. To just give you the context, I have mentioned this. And what they are doing is they are now talking about a different kind of reference period. They are saying that we need to use modified mixed reference period. And the committee was mixed reference period. They are now modifying it further. They're saying that instead of having just two reference periods of 30 days and 365 days, why not three reference periods? 7 days, 30 days, 365 days. Now, the rationale behind this, some kinds of goods, right, their prices keep on fluctuating quite frequently. And include those items within the 7-day reference period. Some items it is 365 days, some items it is 30 days. So for clothing, footwear, education, medical care, durable goods, the reference period can be 365 days. For edible oil, egg, fish, meat, vegetables, right, these prices keep on changing quite frequently. The reference period can be 7 days. For remaining items, remaining food items, fuel and other things, keep it 30 days. Right, so you are now including more items and you are making your calculations much more representative of the reality. Apart from that, one of the estimate that the Tendulkar committee made was, one of the assumptions the Tendulkar committee made was, in rural areas and urban areas, the consumptions are more or less same, and we need to have just one basket, uniform poverty line basket can be there. Another committee is not agreeing with that. They're saying that now also in rural areas and urban areas, the consumption varies, so they are now separating the poverty line baskets. In urban areas, you're having a particular kind of poverty line basket. In rural areas, it is different. They are also now modifying the calorific norms. Right? Till this point of time, or some of the committees in the past would have suggested that in rural areas you need 200 kilocalories, in urban areas you need 200 kilocalories. Now, the Rangarajan committee is evaluating this. Over a period of time, both in rural areas and urban areas, you now have more mechanization. Even in agriculture, there is mechanization. You have better modes of transport and communication. So the amount of energy that individuals need now, as compared to 1960s, 70s, is different. They need less energy maybe. So they are now modifying these norms. Right? In urban areas, you need 29 kilocalories. In rural areas, you need more kilocalories as urban areas, but it is less than what they needed in the past. What is interesting is they are also including some norms for proteins and fats. So individual in urban areas, rural areas, they require some amount of proteins, they require some amount of fats. These are all very important for your physical well-being. Right? So this is what they have included norms. These are new things which are included by the Rangarajan committee. Right? So these are some of the new things that they have taken up, like fats, proteins when introduced for the first time, and they reduced the calorific norms. These are all reflecting the changing lifestyles. So what is the result of all these things? Right? So they have changed the poverty line basket. So what is the number as per the poverty line basket? As per the Rangarajan committee, the poverty ratio in India is 29.5%, and rural area, the poverty ratio is 30.9%. In urban area, the poverty ratio is 26.4%. And in urban areas, poverty ratio will be less as compared to rural areas. That is something that is obvious. And overall, it is 29.5%. Right? So what does it point to? It points to the fact that there has been a significant drop in poverty ratios, right, over time. Keep in mind that our poverty estimates are becoming more representative of the actual situation over time. Right? If you look at the committee and if you look at the Rangarajan committee, again, the number of parameters that have taken is changing. The reference period has also changed. Right? So 29.5%, it shows that we have reduced poverty rates massively. And this is something which is also shown by other estimates, like independent estimates, World Bank and other institutions. They have also carried out estimates. They also point out that in case of India, there has been a reduction in poverty rates. So this is how the Rangarajan committee's ratio looks like. And now, just to show you how the methodology, if it is changed, how the poverty rate changed, I'm just giving you another example. This is for the data for the 2011-12. If you are using the Tendulkar committee's estimates and if you are using the Rangarajan committee's estimates, how will the data look like? Right? So if you are using the Tendulkar committee's estimate, the poverty rate will be even less, 21.9%. And if you are using the Rangarajan committee's estimate, the poverty rate will be 29.5%. Now, a few moments back, we saw what was the poverty rate, right? If you are using the Tendulkar committee's estimate for the 2004-2005, right? So as compared to that, the poverty rates have gone down drastically, right? So if you are comparing 2004-2005 with 2011-12 and use the same methodology, the Tendulkar committee, right? The poverty rates have gone down. And if you are just using the same data set, but you are using different methodology, the poverty numbers will be different. And yeah, it holds true for both rural and urban areas as well. 25.7, 30.9, 20.7, 26.4. Right? So I just want you to appreciate how methodology or how which methodology you use leads to different kinds of numbers. Right? So always keep in mind, counting is always a political exercise. So this is something about the official poverty estimates. We will look at some other ways by which poverty is estimated. Right? And specifically, we are going to look at what is called as multidimensional poverty index. Now, till now, what we are doing, we have been trying to have some monetary estimates, so as to say. Right? We are looking at people's income, we are looking at people's consumption, right? Mostly consumption in the Indian context, and we are trying to find out whether an individual, whether household is able to afford the basic goods and services. So this is one way to estimate poverty. These are all monetary estimates. But another way to look at poverty is to look at the different dimensions of poverty. As we had discussed some time back, poverty implies a host of things. Poverty implies people don't have access to education, people don't have access to healthcare, people don't have a basic standard of life. Right? They don't have access to sanitation facilities, they don't have assets, they don't have housing facilities, host of things. How can you measure the deprivation of people along these lines? The previous one was not indicating of that. The previous estimate that we saw is not indicating of that. In fact, Ranga's was not indicating of that. It was like the latest official estimate. So if you have to understand the deprivations along these lines, there is one measure out there, which is called the multidimensional poverty index. Now this has been developed by the United Nations Development Program in collaboration with Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative. And what they do is they are identifying three dimensions. Right? They are including three dimensions in their estimates. So three dimensions are health, education, and living standards. And for each of these dimensions, again, it's divided into two subcomponents or six subcomponents. Under health, they have two components: nutrition, child mortality. Under education, they have two components: years of schooling and school attendance. Under living standards, again, they have some six components: cooking fuel, sanitation, drinking water, electricity, housing, assets. So what they're trying to find out is they're trying to find out the deprivation along each of these lines. Whether households have access to cooking fuel facility or not. Whether households have the right kind of nutrition status. Whether there is an instance of child mortality in some households. Whether households have electricity supply or not. Whether they have clean drinking water facilities or not. Whether households have toilets or not. So all these dimensions they're trying to measure. And each of these dimensions, health, education, and living standard, the weightage is 1 by 3, 1 by 3, 1 by 3. But since each of these components is further divided into subcomponents, the weightage of each of these components will again vary. So health has 1/3 weightage, nutrition is one of the two components under health. So the weightage given to nutrition is 1 by 6. The weightage given to child mortality is 1 by 6. Weightage given to years of schooling is 1 by 6. Weightage given to school attendance is 1 by 6. The weightage given to cooking fuel is 1 by 18 because there are 6 components here, and total weight to living standards is 1 by 3. So to each of these components, right, the weightage is 1 by 18, 1 by 18, 1 by 18. So the point I want to make is the multidimensional poverty index looks at all these dimensions, right, and then it tries to find out what are the deprivations, what is the extent of the deprivations, right? So and accordingly, it finds out a particular state, a particular society, how much multidimensional poverty is there in that society. So all these parameters I just explained one by one. So under health, so they have two parameters: child mortality and nutrition. The total weight given to health is 1 by 3. So to each of these parameters, the weight given is 1 by 6, 1 by 6. So if any child has died in the family, right, then that particular family's score will be reduced by 1 by 6. Nutrition: if any adult or child in the family is malnourished, so what will happen in that case? Their score will again be reduced by 1 by 6. Education: years of schooling: if no household member has completed 5 years of schooling, their score will again be reduced by 1 by 6. School attendance: if any school age member is not attending school up to the class 8, right, again their score will be reduced by 1 by 6. Then when it comes to standard of living, there are 6 parameters: electricity, drinking water, sanitation, flooring, what kind of floor the household has, whether it has dirt floor, sand floor, dung floor is covered with dung, what kind of cooking fuel they have, right, whether they have wood, they're using wood, charcoal, whether they're using dung as well. So in that case, they're considered poor. Whether they have assets or not, TV, radio, telephone, bike, motorbike, all these things they have, if they don't have all these assets, they will be considered poor. So each of these parameters that you have will have a weightage of 1 by 18. Right? So if they don't have, let's say, electricity supply, then the score gets reduced by 1 by 18. If they don't have drinking water supply, the score gets reduced by 1 by 18. If they don't have toilet facilities, the score will get reduced by 18. If they don't have a concrete floor, the score will get reduced by 1 by 18. So all this thing is taken into consideration, all these derivations are taken into consideration, and the multidimensional poverty score is computed. And from that, we get an idea what is the extent of multidimensional poverty in an economy, in a society. So this is how the multidimensional poverty numbers are computed, right? So you are looking at deprivation along multiple levels. Now, what is the advantage of using something like a multidimensional poverty index? See, if you are using something like a Rangarajan community estimate or Zucker estimates, so here you're just getting an idea what is the proportion of people who are above poverty line, what is the proportion of people who are below poverty line, right? This is the only number, or this is the only thing that you're getting. But when you have something like a multidimensional poverty index, you get an idea what is the percentage of people who are multidimensionally poor along health lines, right? Who are deprived along health lines. You get an idea how many people are deprived along education lines. You get an idea what is the extent of undernutrition. You get an idea what is the extent of population who don't have access to water, drinking water facilities, sanitation facilities, right? So you have all these deprivations, or you get an idea what is deprivations. So when you have to have policies to address poverty, you can actually target people. You can actually design policies which can help address poverty, right? If let's say we get to know that people are poor mostly because people don't have access to sanitation facilities. If you get an idea that people are poor mostly because they don't have access to health facilities, what is the influence from that? The focus will now be on policies which try to ensure that you have better health facilities, you have access to better health facilities. So you have more idea, you have more information, you have more idea how to go about it, right? Your policy approach will be better targeted, it will be better directed now, right? So this is the advantage of something like a multidimensional poverty index, and it actually is able to capture the multiple dimensions of poverty which is not being captured in the previous kind of estimates that we saw, monetary estimates that we saw. So that is the reason why multidimensional poverty index is something which is interesting, it is something that different countries are now trying to use for evaluating or realizing where they are moving, right? They're trying to compute multidimensional poverty index and they're trying to find out where, in which direction they are moving to. Now, it's not that multidimensional poverty index is the solution to everything, in the sense that multidimensional poverty index, yes, it is good, it is actually reflective of how poverty looks like, but it also has certain kinds of limitations, right? So as civil services aspirant, we need to look at some of the lacuna aspects, right? We always should have a holistic picture, and we should look at the positives, but at the same time we should always look at some of the challenges. So the multidimensional poverty index also suffers from some challenges. What are those things? Now, what do you observe here? What are all those parameters that you are measuring? You are looking at different parameters, right? For example, whether a particular household has drinking facility or not, whether a particular household has toilet facility or not, right? All these parameters you are saying, these are kind of inputs, right? All these inputs can lead to a situation where the outputs can be good. Some of the parameters that it is trying to count or measure these outputs. For example, what is the extent of nutrition, right? Maybe there are some families where there is malnourishment. This is an output. In some cases, they're trying to find out mortality numbers. This is an output. So if you look at all the different kind of things that are being measured, they're either inputs or outputs, but they do not reflect capabilities. Sometime back, I was talking about deprivation and capabilities. Professor Amartya Sen, economist, talks about poverty being one kind of capability deprivation. People who are poor, they're deprived of capabilities. This is something which the multidimensional poverty index is not able to measure. It is just measuring some inputs and outputs. It is not measuring how much people are deprived when it comes to capabilities, how they're lagging behind, right? Whether they don't have education or whether they don't have skills. This thing is not getting captured exactly. Another issue with global MPI as it is right now. So it measures child death that occurred at any time, right, instead of last 5 years. Right? So for 11 countries, what they have done is they are looking at mortality numbers at any point of time. Ideally, it should be within some time frame, but since they did not have enough data points, so instead of measuring child deaths in the last 5 years, previous to the survey, they have counted the number of child mortalities, the extent of child mortalities at any point of time in the last 11 years. Right? So it might not give you the exact estimates. Apart from that, you don't have an idea about inter-household inequalities. See, within the household, inequalities exist. Some are poorer, some are not. Look at any typical household. Usually, what happens? Females might be poorer as compared to their male counterparts. Generally, that is the case. The male members, they go and work outside. The females, they are not working outside. And it's not that they're not working. They're working, but they don't have income. They're carrying out different kinds of unpaid work. They're carrying out different kinds of caring work. They're carrying out different domestic house responsibilities. They're not paid for that. But equal amount of labor they're putting, but they're not getting any returns. While the male counterparts, they're going and working outside and they're earning money. So within household also, women might not have enough resources at their disposal. It doesn't get reflected in the Multi-Dimensional Poverty Index. In fact, those who are elderly, right, they might also be poorer. It also doesn't get reflected in this. Right? So the inequalities that are there within the household is not captured by the Multi-Dimensional Poverty Index. That doesn't mean that we'll just throw away the Multi-Dimensional Poverty Index. What I'm saying is these are some of the limitations right now. Apart from that, it doesn't mention or it doesn't measure inequality among the poor. Right? Those who are multi-dimensional poor, you have an idea. But among them also, what is the extent of inequality? We don't have an idea about that. Apart from that, all these estimates that we have, they're based on publicly available data and cover various years between 2009 and 2020. For some countries, it will be 2009. For some countries, it will be 2015. For some countries, it will be 2018. Right? So it becomes very difficult to compare between countries. In the sense that, see, for country X, let's say you have MPI data on the basis of data set from 2009. For some other country, maybe you have data set from 2014. For another country, you have data set for the year 2018. Right? How do you compare between them? Right? Ideally, you should have data set for the same year for different countries. That way, the cross-country comparisons will be easier. And that is not happening because again, they are dependent on publicly available data set. And in many countries, maybe they haven't collected data for each year. Right? And in some cases, maybe publicly available data sets are not there. So cross-country comparability, direct cross-country comparability might not happen. So these are some issues with the global multi-dimensional poverty index. Now, there's something interesting which has happened in the Indian context. So in India, Niti Aayog, which is the government's think tank, it has collaborated with the Oxford Poverty and Development Initiative UNDP, and they have come up with what is called as the National Multi-Dimensional Poverty Index. Right? So we now have a Niti Aayog MPI data. So we have a national MPI data. So we have one global MPI data. So according to that, again, 27.9% of Indians are multi-dimensionally poor. But apart from this global MPI data, we also have a national MPI data. So this is something that Niti Aayog has come up with along with those who have initiated the multi-dimensional poverty index. But what is different is the methodology here. Now, what is this difference? So if you look at the global MPI, right? So there are 3 dimensions: health, education, standard of living. Health will have 2 dimensions, education will have 2 dimensions, and standard of living will have 6 dimensions. But the Niti Aayog MPI data, the national MPI data, it has more dimensions. Right? It has now 3 plus 2 plus 7. So it has 3 broader dimensions: health, education, and standard of living. But within health, they have 3 dimensions. Within education, they have 4 dimensions. Within standard of living, they have 7 dimensions. So 12 dimensions as compared to 10 dimensions in global multi-dimensional poverty index. So what is the change here? Within health, they have included something called as antenatal care. Right? So the focus is on maternal health now. Right? Whether what kind of care pregnant women are getting. So that is one component they have included. And within standard of living, they have included bank accounts, whether people have access to bank account or not. So this is a change here. Broadly, the 3 dimensions remain. The subcomponents are changed. Right? The subcomponents are changing. What happened? The weightage for each of the subcomponents will be different now. So for nutrition, previously the weightage was 1/6. Now also it is 1/6. But for child mortality, adolescent mortality, and antenatal care, the weightage has become different now. So 1/3 into 1/2 into 1/2. So the weightage is 1/12, 1/4. Right? 1/3 into 1/4. For years of schooling and school attendance, since the subcomponents have not changed, the weightage remains the same. In this case, you have now 7 parameters instead of 6. So 1/3 multiplied by 1/7. So the weightage for each of the parameters is 1/21. So weightage given to each of the subcomponents is now decreasing. So this is the difference. And if you look at the data that you have right now of multi-dimensional poverty and deprivation along multiple lines, you realize that when it comes to cooking fuel, 58.5% of Indians are deprived. Right? So 58.5% of Indians do not have access to cooking fuel facilities. Sanitation, again, 52% of Indians do not have access to sanitation facilities. 45.6% of Indians do not have access to housing facilities. Right? So this kind of crucial, critical feedback you can get from here. Now keep in mind that you might have a question at this point that we are saying that India has become open defecation free. The schemes like Ujjwala and all these things are doing well, and as a result of which people have access to cooking gas facilities. And if that is the case, then how come so many people are deprived along these lines? Why so many people are not having sanitation facilities as per this data? Why so many people don't have access to cooking facilities as per this data? Now, there can be 2 things here. First is this data that we have right now. It is on the basis of the 4th round of National Family Health Survey. Right? So the data is not recent. Right? It is from the period of 2014-15. Right? So these numbers that you see are not recent. Second thing is, whatever again have been claimed by the government, again, some of these things might not be completely correct. Right? Maybe in 2019 the government has declared that we are open defecation free, but again there are different estimates which point out that we have not reached that stage. Now also there are many cases where people defecate out open. But I mean, broadly this is an older data. It's not a newer data set. Though this particular index was computed recently in 2021, but it is based on 4th round of National Family Health Survey data. So now let's look at another dimension. See, we have 2 different estimates now, right, of multi-dimensional poverty. One is the global multi-dimensional poverty index estimate. Another is the national multi-dimensional poverty index estimate, right, when Niti Aayog is involved. As per the GMPI, the headcount ratio in India is 27.9%. As per the national MPI, the headcount ratio is 25.01%. Now, how come there is this divergence? One says that in case of India, the multi-dimensional poverty level is 27.9%. Another is saying it's 25.01%. You might think that, okay, this difference is quite minimal, right? It's somewhere around 2.8%, and 2.8% is not much. But keep in mind the population of India, right? So if you have like 130 crore people, 2.8% is a huge number, right? If you look at it in absolute terms. So what is the reason why you have this divergence? We need to understand that. And not only this, the national MPI also has some issues, right? So we need to look at what are some of the issues with NPI and MPI. And it's not just for the sake of criticizing. We need to understand why. I mean, if you don't criticize something, or if you don't look at the flaws of something, then how will you improve on it, right? That's the reason we always look at anything from multiple angles, right? Positives, negatives, we try to analyze. So the thing is, first is this NPI data that you have, right? It's not something which is recent data. It's based on National Family Health Survey data of 2015-16, right? The 4th round of National Family Health Survey was carried out. The data was released at the point of time. So the survey is from 2015-16. The data is recently used, right? So that is one limitation. Another issue is, see, why Niti Aayog is changing the parameters that Oxford Poverty and Development Initiative and UNDP are using. Ideally, there should be some explanation for it, but we don't have much explanation of this in the report as well or in the public forum. Right? So ideally, whenever you make modifications to some methodology, there should be some justification for it, right? So and this justification should be clearly communicated. So this reason was not clearly communicated, which again, so basically there's some form of opacity. Ideally, we would want more transparency along these lines. Third thing, or one of the most important things here is the weights have been changed. Now, if you are changing the weights, what will happen? It will give you different figures. And if the weights are changed in a manner such that a new parameter has been introduced, right? And if the performance along the new parameter is good, what will happen? The poverty line will go down and the poverty ratio will become better. I'll give you an example here. Say 2 parameters are included: access to bank account and antenatal care. Right? So because you are including access to bank accounts, what will happen? All the other parameters that were there within standard of living, the weightage was 180. Now what has happened? The weightage has gone down 121. If India's performance is good in terms of access to bank accounts, what will happen? This will now shield the poor performance along the remaining parameters. Similarly, if you are including antenatal care, So what is happening? The weightage to other parameters are gradually getting reduced. For example, other parameter that was there, right? So child mortality was another parameter. Its weightage is getting reduced. So child mortality and adolescent mortality, right? Its weightage is getting reduced. So if India's performance in these on these lines was bad because of introduction of a new parameter, and where like India, if it is doing well, like for example, in the institutional deliveries and all these rates have gone up. So what happened? The poor performance along the lines of child mortality and adolescent mortality will go down. As a result of which, what will happen? The multidimensional poverty numbers, right? It will basically go down. It will not be same as what it was in the previous years. Right? And this is what is happening here. Right? So when it comes to bank account, when it comes to mental health, right? Some dimensions India has done well, and some of these parameters have been included. As a result of which, the weightage given to the other parameters have gone down. Right? The poor performance along those parameters have been kind of shielded. Another criticism, this equally applies for global MPA as well as national MPA, is how you have clubbed different kinds of parameters. Certain parameters that are used for computing the MPA, both global MPA and MPA, they're outputs. For example, years of schooling is an output, right? And then there are certain parameters like cooking fuel, which are inputs. If cooking fuel is not good, right? If you're using different kinds of, let's say, wood or other kind of cooking fuel, it can lead to pollution and other things which can again have a bearing on mortality rates, right? Which is again output. So you have combined inputs with outputs, which is statistically these kind of things should not be carried out. Apart from that, it has also been clubbed with stock indicators. There are certain kinds of parameters which remain like that for a long duration. For example, mortality is a stock indicator. If there has been a death in the family, right? This year you go and do a survey, ask them whether there was an incident of mortality, they will say yes. Next year you go and ask them whether there has been mortality, they will say yes. So for a longer duration, they will be deprived along those lines. They will not get the score along these lines, right? So this is a stock indicator. So input parameters, output parameters, stock indicators all have been put together. So it might not give you the right kind of estimates. Also, another way to look at it is if inputs are poor, output will also be poor. If toilet facilities are not there, any water facilities are not there, it will lead to a situation where there will be high mortality rates. It increases the chances of mortality. So you are counting child mortality, you are also counting deprivation along the lines of cooking gas, deprivation of cooking gas, deprivation of water facilities, etc. So you are double counting things. Because if there is a household which doesn't have these kind of facilities, of living sport, chances are there that undernutrition or mortality rates will also be high. So there's a position between them, there's linkage between them, right? So double counting can happen if you are clubbing input parameters or output parameters. So this is again another criticism that is time and again pointed out when it comes to MPA, both NPA as well as global MPA. So with this, we will end our discussion on multi-dimensional poverty index. But this does not mean that we have covered all the different dimensions of poverty. Poverty also has some other dimensions. For example, poverty has regional dimensions as well. It's not that poverty is uniformly distributed throughout the state, throughout the society. There are certain pockets, certain places where you will have more prevalence of poverty, right? So there is a regional dimension. There are some states which have high poverty numbers. There are certain regions within states where you have high poverty, right? So there is a regional dimension. Also, there is a social dimension. Not all socioeconomic groups will have similar levels of poverty. Right? There will be some social groups among whom the prevalence of poverty will be quite high. There will be some socioeconomic groups who are comparatively affluent. Right? So these dimensions are also there, and I will just show you some data points which might help you understand this. Right? So this is from 2011-12 data, and you can always refer to these data points. Right? I'll just show you one thing. These are different states you can see, and this is the percentage of poverty. Right? These are states, and again, you can see Andhra Pradesh, 13.7% was the extent of poverty. Right? But places like Bihar, it's 41.3%. Places like Chhattisgarh, it's 47.9%. Goa, it's just 6.3%. So this gives you an idea how some states they have massive amount of poverty, right? And some states the poverty numbers will be less. Look at Madhya Pradesh, this 44.7, Jharkhand 40.4%, Odisha 45.9%, Manipur 46.7%. Right? So again, Andaman Nicobar Islands, small base, Union Territory 6%. So what I want to say here is certain states poverty rates are quite high, certain states poverty rates are comparatively low. Also, you can see the urban and rural split, right? Most likely in urban areas poverty rates will be less as compared to rural areas. There is a social dimension to poverty as well. We'll come to that. Look at head count ratio, right? So this is based on National Family Health Survey data of 2015-16. What percentage of the population is multidimensionally poor, right? So based on NFS data, and look at it, right? Massive variation. Places like Goa, Kerala, very few people are multidimensionally poor. The proportion of multidimensionally poverty is quite low. Look at Bihar, 51.9%. Look at Jharkhand, 42.16%. Look at Uttar Pradesh, 37.79%. Right? So states like Bihar, more than 50% of the population is multidimensionally poor. States like Punjab, Tamil Nadu, Himachal, right? So they are way better when it comes to addressing multidimensional poverty. Now, one thing keep in mind, this is percentage. Look at states like Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. These are states which are also populous, right? So if the states have large population and they have a large proportion of people who are poor, imagine, right? So the absolute number of multidimensionally poor people is also huge. Right? Uttar Pradesh, look at its population, and if 37.7% of the population is poor, then bulk, like, a huge number of people are poor. Bihar, again, populous state. Madhya Pradesh, again, a populous state. Right? So this gives you an idea, like how there is a regional dimension to poverty as well. And these are all union territories. Now, as I mentioned, there is also a social dimension to poverty. Right? There are some socioeconomic groups among whom poverty might be more concentrated. Right? For example, look at scheduled tribes, look at scheduled castes. Right? Among scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, for example, let's say 2011 data for rural poverty. If 25.7 is the all India poverty rates, then among scheduled castes, among scheduled tribes, the poverty rate is way more. If you look at urban areas, right? If all population poverty rate is 13.7, among scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, the poverty rate is way more. So all these things give you an idea that poverty is concentrated among certain sections of the population and certain regions. Right? This is on the basis of occupation, and you find that those who are contractual laborers, those who are agricultural laborers, among them the poverty rate is concentrated. Right? So casual laborers 25.8%. Those who are wage, those who are having some form of salary, the poverty rate is comparatively less. Right? So this is about how we have been measuring poverty. This is all about how there are different dimensions to poverty, right? And we looked at the multi-dimensional poverty index, and we also looked at some regional social dimensions. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the causes of poverty. Right? We'll look at some of the broader causes of poverty. Apart from the social and the regional dimension, there's another term that is often used. The term is inequality. Inequality refers to unequal distribution of resources in any economy or in any society. Right? So, for example, if you look at Indian society, how is wealth distributed between different sections? Right? The top 10% of the population, how much wealth they have, bottom 30% of the population, how much wealth they have. Right? Or if you look at incomes, how incomes are distributed, how much incomes do the top 20% have, top 10% have, how much incomes the bottom 10% have, the bottom 20% have. Right? So all these things can reflect or can help you understand, can help you measure can tell you about the extent of inequality in the Indian society. So this one organization, Oxfam, it regularly comes up with its reports, its analysis on inequality. Oxfam points out that the world's richest 1% have more than twice as much wealth as 6.9 billion people in the bottom. Right? If you combine the wealth of 6.9 billion people at the bottom, the world's richest 1% have double the wealth of that. In case of India also, the richest 1% have more than 4 times the wealth which the bottom 70% of the country's population has. Right? So this is also kind of interesting. In India also there is massive amount of inequality. And what is interesting to notice, over years this might have also increased. If you look at 1991, at this point of time, the bottom 50% of the population, their income was 20% of the total income in that year. But now it is around 13.1%. The bottom 50%, their income was 20%, now it is 13.1%. If you look at the bottom 50%, their wealth has also decreased from 8.4% to 5.9%. And if you look at the income of the top 10%, it has increased. If you look at the wealth of the top 10%, it has also increased from 1991 to now. Right? So this is something which is kind of interesting and I thought we should discuss. Now, when it comes to inequality, right, time and again questions are raised. There are different kinds of debates and discussions around inequality. Right? Some advocates say that we should have a completely equal society. Now, a completely equal society, is it something which is advisable? That is also questioned many times. Right? Now, if you're saying that you should have complete equality, that means you need to have equality of outcome. Someone like you who is hardworking and who's talented, and someone like me who is not hardworking, not talented. If both of us get equal rewards, is it something which is advisable? No. Right? I mean, you're working hard, you're talented, you should get more salary, and I'm someone who's lazy, who's not talented, and I should get less salary. Right? So, complete equality and equality of outcome is something which is not advisable. Then what sort of equality is advisable? Maybe equality when it comes to accessing opportunity. Maybe this is something that is important. In case of India, equality when it comes to accessing different opportunities might not be there. Look at our health systems, look at our education system. Not everyone has equal access to all these things. So complete equality is also not. When if you are seeking to have equality of outcome, that means irrespective of your efforts, everyone will get similar rewards. This can be a situation where people will not be incentivized to work hard. People will not be incentivized to be innovative. So that is something that is not advisable. But when it comes to equality of opportunity, this is something which governments should strive for and they try to do that. It's some amount of basic services, right? Basic access to some minimum level of services, be it health, be it education, be it nutrition, be it skill development, should be there. And if you have massive amount of inequality in terms of accessing all these opportunities, it can lead to a situation where society will have different problems. Psychosocial issues might emerge, different kinds of social conflicts can be there. Right? So this is where we need to possibly think about inequality. And in recent times, if you look at some of the things that have happened, especially during the time of the pandemic, it might lead to a situation where inequality can increase. One example I can give you is because of the pandemic, right? You had to have social distancing measures, public gatherings were not allowed, and schools and colleges remained closed. Physical infrastructure was not operating. Now think of the implication of that. As the physical infrastructure was not operating, the other option was you have online learning and other things. So school children, right? They want to go to schools. Now those who belong to maybe different sections, those who belong to middle classes, they will have basic infrastructure in place. They will have, let's say, internet connection, they will have phones, they will have laptops, they will have tablets. They will be able to access education. But then those kids, right, who belong to poorer sections, who don't have all these facilities, right, they are not able to access education. So this kind of things which happen, right, over a period of time, it will also lead to. I mean, it has already started. There is learning gap because of this, and eventually this will translate into difference when it comes to employability, difference in terms of skills. Right? It will lead to increase in inequality in the future. So these kind of things we have to find out ways to address. Right? This inequality cause because of the way we possibly dealt with the pandemic or some of the measures that we have taken. So since we're talking about different dimensions of poverty, I thought we should include inequality. And always keep in mind that equality in terms of outcome is not advisable. Equality in terms of access opportunity is something that is advisable. So now we will move to the next part. We will talk about the causes of poverty. So what causes poverty? Now we have a rough idea. What is poverty? What are the different dimensions of poverty? How poverty is estimated? We know about the monetary measurement of poverty. We also have some idea about how do we measure different deviations of poverty, the multidimensional poverty measurements. So what causes poverty? Right? Don't think that if people are not having money, that is causing poverty. That's not the case. Right? People are poor, that's the reason they don't have income. Right? So usually many times people think that people don't have money, that's the reason poverty is being caused. No, it's not the case. It is because of poverty that people don't have income. Now the causes of poverty can be again divided into broadly two types, which can be further divided into subtypes. One of the major causes of poverty is the structural reasons, so to say, the kind of social system that we have had. Right? If you look at Indian society, social mobility has been restricted. Social mobility means the ability of an individual to move from one position in the social hierarchy to another. In case of Indian society, social mobility is restricted. I'll give you an example. In case of Indian society, traditional Indian society, you have what is called as the caste system. It is a rigid system. People born in a particular caste, they have to take up the occupation of the same caste. Right? They cannot, I mean, they're restricted from taking up other occupations. People might also be restricted from taking up education. So different kind of barriers have been traditionally imposed. If they're doing something which is traditionally not allowed, since they're part of a particular caste, then there will be different kinds of restrictions. So when you have all these kind of restrictions, what happens? A person might be talented, but that person cannot find an occupation which is suited for his talent. So different kind of social restrictions that are imposed because of caste and other things restrict social mobility, which leads to a situation where people's talent is underutilized. People are not able to take up things which suits them, which they're good for. Right? So these are some structural factors which has led to poverty, which has led to prevalence of poverty. But it's not the only factor. There can also be different other economic factors. There are different kinds of economic policies that get followed. It can also be the reason why poverty still continues. For example, in case of India, you will still find large sections of population not literate. Right? Again, maybe the literacy rate is somewhere around 75%. But again, these people might not be educated. They might not have all the skills that is required to participate in the economy. Right? Maybe on papers they're literate, but they don't know how to do basic numbers. They don't know how to communicate. So all these things prevent people from being employable. All these things prevent people from participating in economic activity, from being gainfully employed, which again leads to a situation where they continue to remain in poverty. So India also has huge unemployment. Different estimates, right? Look at different unofficial estimates, official estimates. They point to the fact that there is massive unemployment. Why there is massive unemployment? Because we have not been able to create jobs. Look at the number of people who are entering into our economy every year, who want to participate in the economy. Look at the labor force participation rate. Are we able to create enough jobs? We are not. If you are not able to create enough jobs, what will happen? People will be pushed back into poverty. One of the things which happens is people get pushed back into what people stay in the agriculture sector as disguised employees. Huge section of the population is engaged in agriculture, but the contribution of agriculture to the economy is minimal. Why? Why so many people are engaged in agriculture? Because they don't have any other avenues of employment. They have not been able to make a shift from agriculture to manufacturing or services. But the number of people engaged in agriculture is more than 50%. Right? People have not been able to make that shift, and the number of economic opportunities that we have is limited. And again, this is also linked with post-war regulations, for example, labor laws, other things which lead to a situation where our industries are more capital intensive. They're not labor intensive. Industries have not been able to accommodate more labor. There's also lack of entrepreneurship. Right? Maybe we are talking about startups in recent times, but again, we don't have enough entrepreneurial talent, or we have talent, but we have not been able to tap that talent. Right? Number of homegrown enterprises have not increased, and they have not been able to accommodate people who could have been in these sectors. Right? Accommodate people out of labor. Lack of investment is also another issue, and whatever investment is there is primarily capital intensive. So all these factors lead to a situation where we don't have enough economic opportunities, economic activity, and as a result of which people remain stuck in certain kinds of low productive occupations. As a result of which they have not been able to move out. Also, you can talk about other dimensions. For example, different kinds of reasons why poverty exists, or different kinds of dimensions because of poverty exists. Like for example, health damage. In case of India, do people have access to quality, affordable healthcare? That's not the case. So if people are in the middle classes, a health emergency is enough for them to be thrown back into lower middle class or to lower class, right? So those kind of safety nets are also lacking. Little bit hygiene, sanitation, other things, right? All these things have an impact. They all have an impact on well-being of an individual. Right? If people do not have access to good healthcare facilities, people do not have access to hygiene and sanitation facilities, what will happen? The families, the households, the children, they will fall sick quite often, which might impact their attendance school, which might impact their performance in school, which might impact their getting gainfully employed, their getting skilled in future. So there exists what is called a cycle of poverty. You do not have these basic resources, you do not have access to nutrition, you do not have access to healthcare, you do not have access to sanitation, hygiene, clean drinking water. It again leads to a situation where you will be poor. So you are poor, you don't have access to these things, and since you don't have access to these things, you're back into the cycle of poverty. Right? So this is called the vicious cycle of poverty. Or in other words, poverty breeds poverty. So there is a positive feedback to it. Poverty leading to poverty. Right? So these are the broader causes of poverty. Now, if you have to think about solutions to poverty, how will you think about it? One is the kind of social system that you have, the structural factors, right? You have to design. Now, caste system and other things, right? Discrimination on the basis of caste and other things have been abolished as per the laws, right? Constitution abolishes this, you have different rights, fundamental rights, equality. Right? So this is the legal way of changing things. But when you are trying to change society, legal methods might not be enough. Right? Legal methods always will have limitations. So all these things have to come again from within the society. Social engineering is not something which is easy, and there can be n number of unintended consequences when governments try to do these kind of things. They try to do social engineering. So all these changes can happen from the grassroots level, right? More social mobilization, different kinds of civil society organizations taking methods. So all these things can change social system. When it comes to economic policies, this is something where the governments have a greater degree of control, right? So governments should ideally create more economic opportunities, right? They should ideally create situations, conditions so that trade can be carried out. They should create situations where investment can be created, private sector investments. They should create situations by which manufacturing sector, services sector, they are able to accommodate more people so that people transition from agriculture. This guys employees in agriculture, they are now getting gainfully employed in agriculture sector. So this is where the government's role is important. Similarly, government should be promoting more entrepreneurs, right? If there is more economic freedom, you have more entrepreneurs, right? So different kinds of market failures will be addressed here. So from causes of poverty, you can get an idea of what can be some of the solutions which can tackle poverty to a large extent. Now, the next bit that I wanted to discuss again, a small bit here, is COVID and poverty. How COVID, pandemic, and poverty, how they're linked with one another. Now, the pandemic, what it did. See, for some time now, different states have been trying to address poverty. States world over, different nation states are trying to address poverty. And India has also been trying to do that. In fact, there are different kinds of intergovernmental organizations, right, which are also trying to do that. In the past, we had what was called as the Millennium Development Goals, right? So at an international level, different countries they came together and decided that this is what we are going to target. We have to reduce poverty. 2016 onwards, right? You have what is called as the Sustainable Development Goals. This is for the 2016 to 2030. So different countries have come together and decided that we are going to eliminate extreme poverty and other things. And as I showed you in the beginning, how the poverty rates have been gradually decreasing, right? That $1.9 threshold that is there, the number of people under that threshold has been gradually decreasing. But 2019, later part of 2019, early part of 2020, you're realizing that a particular virus has emerged and there is a global outbreak of this virus. And since you don't know the nature of this virus, right, and it has been spreading at a very fast pace, different countries now they are going ahead with different kinds of mechanisms to stop the spread of the virus. Different kinds of lockdown measures, confinement measures, and so on. As a result of which, what is happening? The economy is getting impacted. The supply chains are now getting broken. For example, India is dependent on China for different kinds of raw materials. Now, as there is a virus outbreak in China, what happens? They are imposing different kinds of confinement measures. As a result of which, Indian industries are not able to operate because they were dependent on raw materials in China. Gradually, after some time, what happens? India is getting impacted by the virus. And in India also, to prevent the spread of the virus, we're having different kinds of lockdown measures, confinement measures. So when you have these measures, what happens? Again, industries are not able to operate. Transportation is not happening. Logistics sector, they're not operating. So there is massive contraction in economic activity. And this is leading to a situation where people are losing out on their jobs. When you had the first lockdown, right, factories were not operating unless they're manufacturing something with a relationship with the commodity. So those who were engaged in these sectors, right, as the factories are not operating, they will not have any. They're thrown out of their jobs. Demand for different kinds of goods and services is changing now. People's salaries are getting reduced. People are losing out on their jobs. And if people's salary is getting reduced, people are losing out on their jobs. Or there is some form of unpredictability in the economy, uncertainty in the economy, what will happen? It will reduce the consumption of different goods and services. The demand for different kinds of goods and services will reduce, which in turn will now act as a signal to different industries and they will now start producing less, which again implies that they will start firing people. So now it becomes a cycle. So the pandemic is leading to a situation where a lot of people are thrown out of jobs, their salaries are bad, and it's creating a situation of economic uncertainty. Right? So this is how the pandemic and poverty they're linked with one another. And different kinds of analysis were out there. For example, the researchers at the United Nations University, they said that in the worst case scenario, 104 billion, around 10 crore people in India would fall below the World Bank Development Poverty line of $3.2 a day for lower middle income countries. Right? So these many people will be pushed back into poverty, which in turn implies that whatever efforts India and different states in India have been putting for a long time now, all these things are going for a toss. At present, 60% of India's population are estimated to 82 billion people live below this particular poverty line, or $3.2 per day. Right? So this is what the United Nations they had made an estimate, and this is one of the illustrations that you can see, like how the poverty numbers are changing over a period of time. Right? Share of people in extreme poverty. So the red line that you can see, this is rural poverty. The pink line that you can see, that is for urban poverty. And you can see that during the lockdown phase, the first lockdown phase, how the poverty rates would have increased. Right? Massive increase in the poverty rates during the first lockdown because economic activities were contained massively. Right? Nothing was happening at this point of time. Again, before the second wave, also you can see the poverty during the second wave. Also you can see poverty rates have gone up because at that point of time also you had national lockdowns and other things. So this is the linkage between poverty and pandemic. Now another dimension that I wanted to talk about is the gender dimension. What about the linkage between poverty and women? Now you would assume that households are poor, right? When generally these kind of calculations are taken done, whenever these surveys are done, right, they look at poverty at the household level. Right? Within the household, they will try to find out how much they're spending, how much they're earning. So at the household level, you get an idea. But there are inequalities within the household. Women tend to be poorer as compared to their male counterparts. Poverty is sexist. That means women are poorer as compared to men. Now, why is this so? Why is the burden of poverty is more on women and girls? There are different ways, different reasons this could be. As per different reports, for example, Oxfam report, women are paid less as compared to their male counterparts for the same amount of work. There are different gender pay gap reports. They also find out the same. That for the same work, women are paid less as compared to their male counterparts. Another way to think of it is, see, women are carrying out different kinds of labor tasks. Right? They're carrying out different kinds of activities. They are working. But the kind of work they do, they're not paid for it. Women, they will do a lot of these unpaid work, domestic household work, caring work. Women in India spend around 5 hours a day on unpaid care work, while men spend merely half an hour on average. Right? So women will be carrying out different activities. They will be cooking, they will be cleaning, they will be taking care of the children, they will be teaching the children, etc. So all these different kinds of activities they do. And on average, they're spending 5 hours. So what happens as a result of it? They are becoming time deprived. Since they're spending a large amount of time here, and for every individual, the total time that is limited. So they are not able to participate in other kind of activities, which would have got them higher wages, higher salaries. Right? So this leads to a situation where they lose out on different kinds of opportunity to participate in paid labor, and they are not able to undertake paid labor. As a result of which, they are comparatively poorer as compared to their male counterparts. Right? So this is an interesting dimension to look at. Now, there are some other ways also you can look at women and poverty. Right? Since we have mentioned this again and again, poverty is multidimensional. There are different dimensions of poverty. So you can think of health dimensions, education dimensions, and other things. When it comes to accessing healthcare, women lag behind. When it comes to accessing education, women lag behind. When it comes to skill development, women lag behind. When it comes to accessing finances, again, women lag behind. So all these things can also lead to a situation where women become poorer. Right? So this is what we mean when we say poverty is sexist. Women face a greater burden of poverty as compared to men. So what is the implication of this? Whenever we have any policy or when we have any government scheme for addressing poverty, it also needs to look at the gender dimension. Right? All that's what happens, this difference that is there between men and women, right, it will continue to exist in terms of income or in terms of wealth. Right? So this is one of the major policy implications, and policy schemes should not ignore that. So this is about women and poverty. Now we are almost at the end of our discussion. So the last part, what is the role of government when it comes to poverty? What it should be doing? So here there are different kinds of schemes policy we will look at that, and then we will look at some broader policy approach that the government should take up. But before that, we need to ask the question: why should government be concerned about addressing poverty? The first thing is, what is government? Government is nothing but the organ of the state. Right? If you consider the different governments that we have, the union government, the state governments, the urban local bodies, the panchayat institutions, what are they? They are nothing but the organs of the state. What is state? State is something that the citizens have created on their own. They have come together and they have created on their own. Why they have created the state? They have created the state so that state tries to look at the well-being of its people. Right? So that is one of the aim of the state. So one of the goal of the state is to ensure that people are not deprived of basic resources. One of the aim of the state is to ensure that people are not deprived of things which are kind of essential. People should be having these basic resources which is required for their survival, and also they should be the right physical health, mental health. They should have enough social connection. They should be having some amount of power. And how will the state do this? It will be doing it through the government, through the union government, through state government, through urban local bodies, panchayat institutions, and the different institutions which are affiliated to these bodies. So government's dharma is to ensure that people become better off, people have a better standard of living. And that is the reason governments come up with different kinds of schemes and policies. So what we will do is we just look at some of the schemes and policies, right, which are there. I'm not going into details because some of these things you will be coming across in current affairs. The idea is you should just have some idea what are some of the things that are going on. And keep in mind, you notice one thing, that it's not just one kind of scheme and policy. Right? They're trying to address multiple things. Right? They're trying to provide housing, they're trying to ensure that people have access to housing, they're trying to ensure people have access to education facilities, all sort of things they're trying to do. Why they're trying to do? Why the government is trying to do this? Because keep in mind, poverty is multidimensional. You have to have a multidimensional approach to address poverty. Right? You just can't have one approach. You have to look at multiple deprivations that people have. We already saw in multidimensional poverty index how people are deprived along multiple lines. So government interventions have to be there along these lines. Right? So what are some of the prevalent government measures? So you have integrated rural development program. The idea is to ensure that rural poor people they have some additional source of income, right, so that they are able to cross the poverty line. Then you have national urban livelihood mission. This is under the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and the focus is on ensuring that urban poor households, their vulnerability, their poverty is reduced. Then there are schemes like Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. The focus here is on providing housing facilities, right? So people in urban areas, people in rural areas, they don't have adequate housing facilities. How do you ensure that they have access to housing facilities? In urban areas, the focus is on those who are living in the slums, how they can have better housing facilities. Then National Rural Livelihood Mission. This is also referred to as Ajivika. Now, under this scheme, two kind of things happen, right? Through this, government is trying to promote wage employment facilities, and it is also trying to promote self-employment opportunities, both things, right? So it tries to provide skills so that people are skilled enough so that they can take up some jobs and accordingly they will get some wages. Another kind of thing the government tries to do is it tries to promote self-help groups so that people can come together, form their own groups, and again these groups can start different kinds of economic activities, and these economic activities can help them earn different kinds of incomes, and eventually they have different kinds of assets. The Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme is again one of the policies to address poverty. What it does tries to do is it ensures that people who are in rural areas they have right to 100 days of work in 1 year. Right, so one member of the rural areas can have work for at least 100 days in a year. Right, and it kind of can increase economic security, and it can also lead to a situation where migration from rural areas to urban areas can be decreased. This is migration first. Right, so these are different kinds of policies, different kinds of interventions from the side of the government. Now, apart from that, you can also include different kinds of schemes, policies when it comes to the health sector, when it comes to the education sector, when it comes to nutrition sector. All these schemes, policies are also in a way trying to address poverty. Right? When you have better education opportunities, it in turn in future can make individuals more capable, participate in the economy, and it can reduce the poverty rates. If you have access to better health facilities, right, it reduces different kind of health risks. It prevents people from becoming poor because of different kinds of health emergencies, right? So you can include those kinds of schemes, right? Different kinds of health insurance schemes. Maybe you can also talk about different kinds of nutritional programs, right? If you have the right kind of nutrition, right? So it can lead to better health outcomes, which in turn can lead to better education opportunities, employment opportunities, which will basically increase your productivity. So all those measures can be included. They are also indirectly trying to address poverty. Apart from these government interventions, there are also some broader suggestions by institutions like Oxfam, institutions like World Bank. So I thought I should just put it here together. So that again, in case there are questions, right, what more needs to do, you can always answer this. So Oxfam suggests that there is inequality and there are certain people right who are at the bottom of the societal hierarchy, socioeconomic hierarchy. So these people are excluded. Right? So often suggests that you need to ensure that you have mechanisms by which people who are at the bottom, they're part of the power structure. Right? We in India try to do that. We have democratic decentralization. We have universal franchise. So through these means, people at the bottom they can participate in the power structure. Also, if you look at the constitution, right, we have different kind of provisions by which people in different sectors, right, they can form unions, associations. All these things can ensure that people who are at the bottom they also have some say in the policy making process. Oxfam also suggests that the influence of the rich, influence of the affluent also needs to be checked. Now, what does it mean by this? Is sometimes people who are extremely affluent, right, they might influence policy on their own behalf, right? They might be so powerful that they can influence policies which can benefit them, which can be at the cost of others, right? So these kind of pluralism, right, all these things need to be taken care of. There have to be mechanisms which can ensure competition between players, between individuals, right? It should not be the case that few individuals are extremely powerful, they are the ones who are controlling the policy making process. Then Oxfam also says that there are certain sections of the population, workers, right? They in many societies, many economies, they don't have enough safeguards, right? They cannot form unions, associations, they don't have enough bargaining power. As a result of it, what happens? They are exploited, right? They don't get basic minimum wages, right? Which is required for their sustenance, right? And they don't have any protection. The industrialists, affluent, they are controlling the policies, and whatever policies are there, they're going against the rights of individuals. So what it is suggesting is workers and other people who are at the bottom, they should have some basic rights. And that way, inequality can be taken care of. At least they will have some basic levels of income. Now, another suggestion is the different kinds of tax havens that exist, right? Where people park their black money. These things should be ended. These kind of things should not continue to exist, right? These are places where people are parking their black money, and these money could have been used for different kind of social benefits. Maybe it can be could have been used for different kind of social sectors. Social spending could have been done from that. You have evaded the taxes and parked them. Right? So if you end these tax havens, then these resources, right, people would not be able to park their ill-gotten resources. Compliance to different kind of tax measures will be higher, and the government will have more revenues which they can spend on different social sectors, which can lead to better health outcomes, education outcomes, etc. And for ending these tax havens, you need to have collaboration between governments. It's not that one government can do things, because these tax havens are located in different parts of the world. You need international coordination. So this is what Oxfam suggests. Apart from this, there are some suggestions made by World Bank time and again. So World Bank says that you have to ensure every child has access to better nutrition. If children do not have access to better nutrition, so their physical development, cognitive development, all these things they compromise, which in turn will compromise their education, which in turn will prevent them from having better skills, better employment opportunities, right? Which in turn will lead to a situation where they're back into the poverty. Right? So every child should get access to better nutrition. You have to address malnutrition and nutrition. There should be access to some basic levels of healthcare facility. Right? There has to be some basic health coverage. Everyone should have access to that. Or else what happens? If everyone has these health risks, now easily you can fall back into poverty. Right? As I just mentioned sometime back, right? If there is a health issue, right? Those who are at middle income levels or lower middle income levels, right? They can easily fall back into poverty. There is health emergency. So some basic level of health coverage should be there, which can prevent people from falling back into poverty. Some basic safeguards are there. Access to schools, access to education is again very important. There's something which can help in social mobility. There are ample number of studies which point out how education can lead to social mobility. Cash transfer to poor families, right? This is something which is again important. It gives flexibility to the family. They are best to watch what is more important for them. So if there is some cash transfer, they can decide what is relevant to them and they can accordingly decide. So cash transfers can also help, and this is something which is better targeted. And they are the ones which minimally distort the market. They don't distort the market, right? There are other kind of things where you are imposing different kind of price caps which distort the entire market. Cash transfers don't do that. So cash transfers can be another thing that can be considered. In fact, in India also has been considered in the pandemic because of the cash transfers. So that has been going on. Apart from that, building better infrastructure is important to address poverty. If you have better infrastructure, movement of people from one place to another becomes easier. There is more trade, there is greater investment. Right? Economic activity gets a boost. And if economic activity is getting a boost, there will be more jobs. If there are more jobs, there will be more people who are having higher incomes. Right? So infrastructure is something which has massive multiplier effect. So there has to be better infrastructure, greater investment on roads, electricity, and other things should be there. And lastly, yeah, taxation. Again, World Bank suggests that you should have some form of progressive taxation. Basically, those who are rich, they should have pay higher taxes, and those who are poor should pay lesser taxes. So from the higher taxes, you are basically funding different kind of social sectors. Right? So that is what World Bank suggests, and in India also we usually those who have higher incomes, they will be falling under that high tax band. So these are something which World Bank talks about. So these are broadly some of the things that governments have been doing, but governments should do. Now, we have talked about the government's role, but it is equally important for us to consider the role of the private sector. Private sector plays a critical role in reducing poverty. So why do I say this? See, government can create jobs or government can provide jobs on its own. But how many jobs will government be able to create? Union government, state governments combine, how many jobs they create? It's not much. It is eventually the private sector which creates the maximum number of jobs. In fact, most of the jobs are created by the private sector. So if you have a private sector which is growing, then you will have more number of jobs. You will have greater economic opportunities. So here also there is a role of government. What is the role of government? The government has to ensure that economic activity is promoted. Right? You have higher investments. There is greater economic freedom. Entrepreneurship is promoted. The different kinds of transaction costs that are there right now is reduced. The number of regulatory hurdles that are there. In case of regulated sector, you have huge amount of regulatory cholesterol, right, which prevents economic activity. This regulatory cholesterol needs to be reduced. Right? So if all these things are done, if government intervention is there, which ensures private sector's participation is more in the economy, it can lead to a situation where more jobs will be created. There will be more investment, there is greater trade. All these things can ensure more employment, and which in turn can ensure more people will be freed out of poverty. Yes, private sector in some cases there can be situations like market failure. Again, here there is a role of government. Right? Government has to deal with these market failures. Right? Government has to deal with information asymmetry, has to deal with public goods, has to deal with concentration of market power. These are certain kind of market failure. It has to do that. But there has to be a greater role of private players. It's not that government can solve everything on its own. It needs to take the help of private players. So with this, we will be concluding our discussion on poverty. But we look at some of the questions. Right? We come to the previous questions part. But I just want to recap what all we did. We started with the definition of poverty. Right? How to define poverty? What is the way World Bank looks at poverty? Then we tried to understand, or we tried to look at some of the numbers, understand some of these numbers. Right? We look at numbers at the global level. We look at some of the numbers at the Indian level, like national level. Then we understood poverty in details. Right? What are the different dimensions? Then a large chunk of our time we spent on measuring poverty. Measuring poverty is crucial. If you don't know how to measure poverty, you will not be able to detect poverty. You assume that poverty is 10%, but the poverty rate is 50%. So all your efforts will be only for that 10%. So what happens? The remaining 30%, 40% will be poor. So whenever you have to address any problem, understanding the magnitude of the problem is important, and that is why we spent a lot of time on how poverty is measured and what has been the historical trajectory and some of the recent ways by which poverty is measured and some of the issues. Then we try to look at causes of poverty, pandemic and poverty, women and poverty, and the last part is the role of government. Keep in mind, it's not just government; private sector also has a significant role to play. But in that also, government has to do something. Right? It has to ensure that the regulatory cholesterol is reduced. There is great economic freedom, promote entrepreneurship. Right? The ease of doing business needs to be improved over time. So this is how the discussion of poverty, this is how things look like what we have already discussed now. Let's look at some questions which have been asked in the past. And so though we have separate slides or separate recordings of the IQs, just a brief overview of things which have been asked. COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated class inequalities and poverty in India. Right? UPSC 2020 question. So this is something which we talked about, right? How poverty would have increased as a result of the pandemic. Right? Look at all the facts, right? How lockdowns would have led to different kinds of circumstances, right? It is reducing economic activity, how it is reducing demand. Again, as demand is reduced, how industries, services, they're all fighting people, they're reducing the wages. All these things we talk about. You have to talk about inequality also, right? How during the time of the pandemic, the upper sections of the society, they might not have been as impacted. In fact, some of the upper classes, members of the upper classes, they would have been benefited because of the pandemic. The kind of sectors they are in, right? They would have been benefited. Those who are in, let's say, logistics sector, those who are in online education, right? Those firms would have been benefited. But those who are at the bottom, right? Those who are working as construction laborers, because of the lockdown, they're losing all their jobs. Those who are in the manufacturing sector, they would have been impacted. So all these things lead to a situation where class inequality is increased. Also, we can talk about the education dimension. How there is already inequality when it comes to access to education, which increased further because children from the poor socioeconomic background, they cannot access education because they don't have access to phones, tablets, power, internet, etc., broadband, etc. And in the future, these inequalities will increase further because the learning capacity is further. So all these different dimensions you can talk about how poverty is leading to increase in inequalities and poverty. The next question, UPSC 2018. Despite implementation of various programs for eradication of poverty by the government, poverty is still existing. Now, how will you answer this question? You can talk about different kinds of programs that you have, but you have to talk about the lacuna or some of the issues that most of the programs will have. For example, most of the programs will have different kinds of errors, inclusion errors, exclusion errors will be there. Many of the programs are not well targeted. Many of the programs, there will be leakages. Many of the programs, they don't take into consideration the multiple deprivations that exist. Maybe you are addressing one deprivation, but the deprivation exists at some other level. Right? So, in fact, most of the poverty estimates that we have in India, right? The official estimates that we have, they don't talk about these deprivations. So, if you don't understand the exact deprivation, then obviously your policies will not be targeted. It's not well targeted. There's a scope of making it better targeted. So all these things you can talk about. So identify some programs, talk about what happens in some of the issues with these programs. Also, think about the larger, bigger causes, right? Think of those causes which lead to poverty, structural issues and other things, right? And these things still continue to exist. Social mobility is still restricted, right? Look at the economic policies, right? Ideally, there should be easy transition from, let's say, the agrarian sector to the manufacturing sector or service sector. This is what happened. Now also, look at manufacturing growth. And again, one of the issues people face in urban areas, right? Rural urban migration is not enough, right? Rural urban migration is limited. What is the reason for that? So all those things we can talk about. Social mobility, economic mobility is something which still is lacking in the Indian context. That is how you have to point it. Mention core strategies for the transformation of aspirational districts in India. Explain the nature of convergence, collaboration, competition for its success. UPSC 2018. This is something which was linked with one program that was initiated back then. Aspirational districts program was initiated, and it talked about how there should be convergence of different schemes, how there should be collaboration, and how there should be competition between different type of districts, so that again these districts can be transformed. So again, at that time this was in the news, so that is the reason it was asked. So maybe you can just refer to this particular scheme and try to link it with the poverty dimensions. An essential condition to eradicate poverty is to liberate the poor from deprivation. Substantiate this statement with suitable examples. It was asked long back in 2016, but this question is still relevant. Now, what is this question asking you? An essential condition to eradicate poverty is to liberate poor from deprivation. Now, what is this liberate poor from deprivation? See, what it is trying to say is poor people can be stuck in the vicious cycle of poverty. They're stuck in a cycle. If they're stuck in that vicious cycle of poverty, they will continue to remain poor. So you have to liberate them. You have to break the cycle of poverty so that they can move out of poverty, so that poverty can be eradicated. You have to give examples. The examples that we discussed just now, right? If people are poor, they don't have access to health, education, and nutrition, what will happen? Eventually they will fall back into poverty. So what should anti-poverty measures be focusing on? They should be focusing on ensuring that people have access to health, education, nutrition, etc. Then only poor people can be liberated out of poverty. So give examples, all these examples, and you'll answer. So if you understand what is the vicious cycle of poverty, you'll be able to answer this question. Now look at another question. UPSC 2015. Critically examine whether growing population is the cause of poverty or is poverty the main cause of population needs. Now this question I don't want to discuss here because this is linked with population and this is linked with a very important concept of population. But if you have studied population, you can relate to it, right? If there is high poverty, fertility rates also tend to be high. If fertility rates tend to be high, it leads to increase in population. Another way of looking at it, if the population is growing at a very fast pace, then the resources are limited. It will lead to a situation where the resources are not properly distributed. So the share of each individual on these resources gets limited. So access to healthcare facilities, access to education facilities, access to different economic opportunities like job gets limited. Right? So growing population can also lead to poverty. Poverty rates can also lead to high fertility rates, which in turn can lead to high population growth. So both sides we can talk about. So these are some of the questions which were asked in the past. Now, these are the questions on the question on the screen are the questions that you can try to attempt on your own. Right? Each of these questions try to answer within 200 words. First question: critically examine the poverty measures undertaken by the government of India during the recent pandemic times. Explain the measures needed to address poverty issues. Right? Here you have to talk about the different kinds of anti-poverty measures taken by the government in recent times and what more needs to be done. Right? So it will help you recap all the things that the government has done. What are the main causes of poverty in India? Discuss something that we already talked about: social reasons, economic reasons. Put all these things together. Right? 50% social factors, 50% economic factors. Examine the various methods implemented by the government of India to tackle poverty line and suggest the changes needed. Right? Also, you know about it, right? Since 1962 to 2011. Different kinds of estimates have been there, right? Broadly talk about it, right? How the reference period has changed, how the number of parameters has changed, right? How different kind of things have updated from calorific norms to other things, right? How more and more parameters have been put. All these things we can talk about. Then you also have to talk about some of the ways by which these things can be improved further, right? For one, right? We don't have a recent poverty estimate. 2011-12, we have an estimate from that point of time. Recent estimates are not there. The NPA data is also based on the fourth round of massive famine and so on. So more numbers, frequent data set, different kind of parameters, more parameters should be included. Right? All these things we can talk about. So these are some questions you have to attempt. Give it a shot. Even if you are taking more time, it's okay. But ensure that you answer these questions and answer these questions within 200 words each. Right? So with this, we will wrap up our discussion on poverty. And as I'm ending this discussion, there are a couple of quotes by Gandhiji and by Nelson Mandela. So these are all quotes related to poverty. Maybe you can use these quotes in your answers. I would suggest not to use these quotes in general because you already have limitations in terms of words, but you can use these quotes to have a question in essay, right? So where you have more natural. Anyway, these are things which you should also appreciate, right? How poverty looks like. Mahatma Gandhi says poverty is the worst form of violence. Right? Do you agree with it? Right? Do you agree with it? Right? As we are concluding this session, I would want you to think about it. Nelson Mandela says overcoming poverty is not a task of charity, it is an act of justice. Like slavery and apartheid, poverty is not natural, it is man-made. It can be overcome and eradicated by the actions of humans. Sometimes it falls on a generation to be great. You can be that great generation. Later, it is possible. This is what Nelson Mandela talks about. Right? So think about these lines and on these note, we will conclude our discussions. Thank you.